I am very happy today because we've got a fan favourite back on the show. Ex-cop, undercover police officer, author. It's Peter bloody Bleksley.
I really needed to get to know him, to understand him, because I thought there were secrets in his head that were going to help us solve Christine's dreadful murder. And I spent days with him, literally, shut away in an interview room. It was a result of that he told me 3 words, which essentially unravelled the case. He is begging me, literally begging me, to give him my 100 grand. And he says, I will be back within the hour, without fail, with your 4 kilos of cocaine. I said, I'm going to get your baby, and I'm going to wring its neck, and I'm going to throw it in a skip. Smash the doors in, seized gear everywhere. There was more gear in the loft. They found another address connected to them, and there was more gear there. Hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of pounds of gear got recovered. 3:30. Everybody up! Everybody up! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Right? Doors coming off their hinges. Right? Here we go. And I would put the joint together, right?
Yeah.
And I could build a brilliant 3-skin, 5-skin. I was very inventive, right?
Yeah.
I could build a joint like you wouldn't believe. So I could shape lines of coke into people's initials. What's your name? And they'd say, Jim. And I would carve them a very nice looking J. And I'd go, go on then, get on that then. So if in the end, I get that £10 note, right? Have a line of Charlie, right? I'd do it if it was going to be a deal breaker. Because as I walked past him, he just pulled the lapel of his jacket open an inch or two so I could see the butt of the gun that he had in the shoulder holster. I've got a guy on the front door with a gun, and I've got this waitress coming to our table now who is probably going to recognise me and blow my cover completely. I'm known for catching pretend fugitives. It made sense for me to actually hunting a real fugitive. Kevin Parle must be found. Kevin Parle will be found.
Yeah.
Finding Kevin Parle is my life's work. Kevin Parle, I'm coming for you.
Hello guys and welcome back to Jack Mate's Happy Hour, the happiest hour in all the week. You all right, Stevie?
I listened back to an old episode earlier, strangely enough, the episode we're now doing part 2 of, and you started by saying the happiest hour in all of the land. And I remember that you used to say that a lot, and it's gone.
That used to be a thing. And we had Raphael Rowe on a few weeks ago now, who obviously got sentenced to a murder that he didn't commit. And everyone was going, oh, stop using that stupid jingle. It's not happy. It's not happy. It's like, as we said to Peter last time, this show originally was meant to be a show where we'd just slag off other YouTubers. So the happy hour was ironic. But
it's still ironic.
Well, you're happy when you're with me, aren't you?
Well, I am for the first 5 minutes, and then
I start bullying you.
You break me down.
Yeah, and we'll get there. Don't you worry, guys. We'll get there. I'll carry that mantle. But like I said last time, I am very happy today because we've got a fan favourite back on the show. Ex-cop, undercover police officer, author. It's Peter bloody Bleksley. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. Although I would like to point out the title of your podcast, Happy Hour, right?
Yeah.
I've had no 2-for-1 cocktails offered to me right, on the 2 times that I've been here. So I might not be overly happy.
Well, if you score the hat trick at one point, then we'll make sure we get you some cocktails.
Okay.
What's your go-to cocktail?
Well, I'm more of a pint of ale kind of man, right?
Right.
Or a glass of red wine.
Yeah.
But the other night I went to a party, a house party, socially distanced and all that before somebody starts banging on about me being flagrantly breaching the COVID regulations, which I don't.
Right.
Small gathering, celebrate a teenager's birthday. And the daughter of the household was making cocktails and she gave me a porn star.
Oh,
Right?
Right. Been many years since you've had one of them, I imagine.
I'm scratching my head to think if I ever have had one. Okay. Anyway, I enjoyed it so much I had 2 porn stars that night. Right? And it was a very enjoyable evening, I have to say. Very enjoyable.
Oh, I'm looking forward to this.
You
already.
love a cocktail.
I do love a cocktail. I'm a bit of a pina colada man.
Not for me. I had a zombie, didn't I, when we went drinking the other day?
Yeah. We're still not sure what that is.
It was just strong. I think the whole name is just to say that it's going to kill you off.
Oh, brilliant.
It was a lovely night.
Peter, since you last been on, because as I mentioned, you are a fan favourite here on the Happy Hour channel. What was the reception like for you? Did you get much?
I got a lot of reaction, and it was overwhelmingly lovely.
Oh, lovely.
And so thank you to the listeners for that. Because essentially, I'm a bit of an old bloke telling stories from many moons ago a lot of the time. And yet people seemed to enjoy them, which was fabulous. People said some lovely things. And then I think you ran a poll not long afterwards about who did the fans want back. And I might be wrong, but I think I was right towards the top of that.
You are. You always are. We often do these polls and stuff, and you always come out on top. So it is a pleasure to have you back. And like you were saying, like an old bloke with stories. That's why you're so good on a podcast, because you've got stories. We 9 times out of 10 we have a YouTuber on who's gone, I did a diss track once.
Don't say that. We still want the YouTubers to come on.
Yeah, for the views.
Okay,
But
yeah, that's fair.
the stories are thin. Do you know what I mean?
You're never going to get us another guest.
No, because we can offer them something now, because the show's doing well. The clips with you, I think, accumulatively have over 500,000 views on YouTube, with an extra couple of 100,000 on the audio downloads. So hopefully we can replicate that. I know you've got plenty of stories for me. You texted me yesterday. I should get it up, actually. So just a little bit of a teaser. I text Peter because we're going to be talking about your new book, Manhunt. You're searching for a murderer, Kevin Parle. That's going to be in the second part of the show. So I said to Peter, I was like, what should we talk about in the first hour? And he's given me some brilliant prompts here. So if you look forward to these. Peter said, I have such stories that feature a baby, a gun and a bucket of piss, a 20p piece, a collie going on the rampage, and an Italian mafioso in London. Take your pick. Well, I'm going to pick all of them, and we'll get to them one by one. But before we do that, how's life been treating you? Because it's a different world now, isn't it?
It is a very different world from December of last year when I first came on. I have been very fortunate, and I thank my lucky stars for that, because as lockdown was imposed, I had a book to write.
Right.
And I'd got behind schedule with that. So for the first 10 or 11 weeks of lockdown, I literally got up every morning, went into my office, and did 2,500 words every day.
Wow.
So to that extent, I was largely unaffected, in so much as that I had a lot to keep me occupied. Frustrating thing was, I couldn't get out and knock on people's doors and get in front of people and all that as part of my investigation into Kevin Parle, which we'll talk about later. So that was deeply frustrating, and there's still elements of that with regards to travel and the like. But essentially, yes, I was very fortunate. As a family, my wife could work from home, so she was okay. My 19-year-old had a job in B&Q.
Right.
So, and he had a lot of work. He was working 5 or 6 days a week, because that was one of the stores that was left open.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he was very cautious, wore his mask, kept his distance, sanitized, all that kind of stuff. And when he got home from work, we literally sort of defumigated him at the front doorstep.
Right.
And he went straight in the shower, and his clothes went straight in the washing machine.
Yeah.
And my other son, my younger son, was studious and got on with his schoolwork. And do you know what? As a family, we actually discovered that we quite like each other.
That's ideal.
So that was a bonus.
Whereas me and Fiona discovered that we fucking hate each other. How does obviously you're searching? You're currently on the hunt for a murderer, which is
He's
alleged.
He's yet to be tried for those 2 crimes. He's wanted for those 2 murders.
Right. Okay. And obviously you go here, there, and everywhere, putting flyers out, spreading the message and stuff. So how does lockdown affect something like that? Because these are unprecedented times. We've never really lived through these before. So
no. Well, fortunately, I'm constantly in receipt of information about Kevin Parle, or those that may or may not be harbouring him or funding him and all that kind of stuff. And of course, it's the 21st century, so I can sit at my laptop and be a desktop detective, a digital detective, and do the online research, or speak to my open source expert who does so much of that.
Right.
And I've got a geographical profiler who's been helping me. And we can do all of that electronically and securely.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been great. But I'm a bit of an old school shoe leather detective.
Right.
I like knocking on doors, getting in front of people and saying, I've heard this about you. What would you like to say about that?
Yeah, I can imagine that's quite intimidating, because even you just doing it to me then, I sort of tensed up a little bit.
You know, and I've been denied that. But hey, you know, there are millions upon millions of people who have lost their jobs, who were furloughed, who were living in tower blocks with no outside space and all of that. And
Yeah.
I am so aware of that. And consequently, I regard myself as being extremely fortunate.
Yeah, I think we are. Well, I certainly am as well. Being a YouTuber, I could do stuff from home, and obviously there was more people at home to watch the content. And of course, quite rightly, as you just said, there's a lot of people in terrible situations through lockdown. I'm not going to put myself in that same bracket at all. I'm one of the lucky ones. But it was shit not doing this, wasn't it?
Yeah, we tried. We failed.
We tried to do these shows remotely on Zoom and stuff like that, and it just didn't work. I like being in the room with
Yeah,
with
we
the
actually
people.
turned down a few guests, didn't we? Because it's just not the same. Like, it's so much better having you here, being able to react properly as well. It's such a strange thing to not be able to do on a remote call.
You get the instant reaction. You can feel the emotion more. Like, there was times when like we'd be doing silly ones just between us, and someone would make a joke, but there'd be a delay on the internet, so no one would laugh for a few seconds. You think, oh, it's not landed very well. You go on to say something else, and then the person would laugh, and it would just be an absolute nightmare. But I slowly feel like things are getting back to normal. Do you not?
Yeah, and let's all have a sense of perspective over this, right? Over 40,000 people lost their lives.
Yeah, exactly.
So the fact that a podcast couldn't happen and the fact that I couldn't knock on someone's door is largely frigging irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's been a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been impacted by it through grief and loss and losing jobs and being furloughed and all that kind of stuff, including, you know, some mates of mine who
Right.
struggled.
Yeah.
And one mate of mine is in a very well-paid job, you know, lives in a nice house with a garden, lovely wife, 2 fantastic kids. And he contacted me and he said, we've got to go for a walk. Please, can we go for a walk?
Yeah.
And we did. We went for a very long walk. And he said, I feel guilty about feeling shit
Right.
because of his great job, his lovely house, his wonderful family. He said, and yet this is affecting me adversely and I feel shit. So not only was he feeling shit, but he was feeling guilty about feeling shit.
Yeah.
Because in comparison to millions of others, you know, he was a very fortunate man. So it doesn't matter what your circumstances are. If it impacts upon your mental health, you know, so what? Your mental health is so vital and so important. And on that very note, of course, because I follow you, I've noted your postings during lockdown and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to discuss it for the benefit of your audience, I fully understand. But we know each other.
Yeah.
Mental health is so important to me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm again, as you quite rightly said, people have lost their lives and whatnot. So it feels. I completely resonate with your friend, with what your friend said. Is like, I feel like it's somewhat insignificant, my issues, because I don't really have anything bad happen in my life. Like, I've got a lovely girlfriend, a flat, like everything seems good. But yeah, during lockdown, it just spun my head a little bit. Like, I'm somebody that's very, very sociable. I'll be out of the house all day long if I can, if I'm not working. And even when I am at home, I like to have friends round and whatnot. So being on my own in a confined space, and I suffer from OCD and stuff, so I often felt like the walls were closing in on me. I had to get out, and I struggle quite a bit. And obviously, as you know, Stevie, I like to go out and socialise and drink, and I kind of one of these people. Although I love my job, and I'm very thankful that I have one of the best jobs in the world, I do love the weekend, because most people, excluding lockdown, would go to work, whereas because I'm always in the house, I love to get out. And I found that during lockdown, when the weekend comes, I'd have Zoom parties with people, and I'd drink. And I'd drink just as much as I would when I go out, but I'd wake up and I'd feel so guilty, and I'd feel like a loser for drinking in my house. And do you know what I mean? That was
Okay.
So it was kind of, I felt like I was stuck in this endless rut, and I think it really made the OCDs a lot worse and stuff like that. But I do feel like life is slowly getting back to normal. Me and Steve have been to the pub a few times. I go for a lot of meals with Fiona. So I think it's kind of coincided with my mental health problems coincided with that. And I feel like I'm slowly coming out of that a little bit now.
Well, you've got my number.
Yeah.
We can always talk.
Thank you, mate. That's very kind of you. Very kind of you.
Another great mate of mine lost his mum 12 years ago. She was the most amazing woman. But at the time, my mate had a newborn, and he was very busy, of course, in that. And you know what lockdown did for him? It gave him the time to reflect, and for the first time in 12 years, actually begin to mourn his mum. He'd bottled it up for 12 years. He'd never had the time or the opportunity to actually think and mourn.
Wow.
And of course, that impacted on him.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we spoke.
Right.
And we talked it through, And it was great for him to be able to speak about that. And of course, if you're going to be there for a friend who's got their issues, the most important thing is to listen. And then when you listen, you actually hear that person. And when you hear that person, you will begin to understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
So being a great listener is extremely important if you've got a friend that wants to talk to you.
Right. Yeah. That's strange because obviously, of course, you never get over a death of a parent, but 12 years on. In that 12 years, I imagine there was never that enclosed time where you're just like, your life kind of takes the lead and then you don't have that time where you're just in a room just thinking of it. So maybe that's what a lot of people suffered with, like past traumas and past things like that coming back. How have you been during it mentally? You?
Absolutely fine. As I say, I had all those weeks to write the book and carry on with my investigation into finding Kevin Parle. So by and large, extremely fortunate.
Lovely to hear it. You texted me yesterday. You said you've been. I couldn't work out what you meant. You said you've been in a pile.
Oh yeah, okay, right. Okay.
What's that?
Not a pylon with cables.
Yeah,
right. You know, National Grid.
And you don't have piles. Can we rule that out?
As we speak, and as I touch wood furiously, no. Unfortunately, I have been afflicted with that horrible condition in the past.
Right.
Didn't know this is where this was going.
No.
And it's not fun.
Right. You can see we're comfortable with each other now because it is murder stories. Have you ever had piles?
Yes. Not fun. But I think we can move swiftly on.
What's a pile on?
Well, pile on. When people pile onto you on social media.
Oh.
You know, so when they're piling onto you with grief and aggravation and nastiness and unpleasantness.
Oh, because didn't you say that like police officers have been doing that?
Yeah. Shall I tell you the story?
Yeah, please do.
Right, okay. A few weeks ago, I was approached by the Sun newspaper. Right? Now, I have to be extremely careful with my relationship with the Sun newspaper. Mm-hmm. Of course, out of respect to the wonderful people in the great city of Liverpool, right, where the Sun is roundly boycotted.
Yep.
So the Sun have not one word from me in connection with my hunt for Kevin Parle. And they never will.
Right.
Okay? I do that out of respect to that great city and its people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But please bear me out and cut me some slack, if you will. That paper approached me to see if I wanted to give an interview about race.
Right.
Sort of in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, this could be a platform, albeit a much kind of vilified platform by many, to actually tell the truth. You know what? And in my life, I've actually found that telling the truth has not got me into trouble, but lying has.
Right.
And that's an important life lesson, I think. So I pondered and I thought, okay, this will be a platform to say what I believe are important things in relation to race. So I gave an interview. And during that interview, I told the truth about my experiences of the Metropolitan Police Force in the late 1970s and the early 1980s. Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is, it was largely full of vile, racist thugs. Not exclusively, but many were. Now, I've told all this before, right? This is not the first time I've said all of that. I did a documentary for the BBC on, I think, the 20th or the 25th anniversary of the Brixton riots. So that's 15 years ago, and I said all this. I did a programme on BBC Radio 4 called The Reunion, where I discussed all that in a panel show with other people there, again, giving our recollections of the Brixton riots that weekend and the build-up to it. And that was because, essentially, young black men were being fitted up and beaten up by vile racist thug police officers, and that was the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I told the truth in this article a few weeks ago. Well, a lot of white, old police officers got the raging up with me and sent me abuse, vile, trashy, pathetic, wank pot abuse in their droves. They went mental.
That sounds like you struck a nerve. Maybe
Well,
said something a bit too true.
Do you know what? If you want to expose a racist, annoy them.
Yeah.
Right? Because then they can't control themselves.
Yeah.
They cannot stop their true colours coming forth.
Yeah.
And I annoyed a lot of them. Right? I got kicked out of numerous police Facebook groups.
Did you?
Right? Yeah. Oh yeah. It went bonkers. Right?
Wow.
Got completely kicked out of them. And one of the really kind of ironic things about it was, just as the article broke, 2 former colleagues got in touch with me and they said, "Are you ready for this? Are you okay?" And do you know what? Both those guys, former colleagues, who I respect enormously, were black.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
My former black colleagues.
Yeah.
They saying, "You all right, mate? You ready for this?"
Yeah.
Because they knew it was going to kick off.
Yeah, I guess they've been on the receiving end of that kind of fucking bullshit their whole lives, so they were the first ones to look out for you.
Yeah.
Fair play.
So then, right, I've been a member for many, many years of an organisation called the Metropolitan Police Ex-Detectives Association.
Okay.
Okay? And they have a grand dinner every year, and they have a spring lunch and all that kind of stuff. And you get an email sort of every week, about colleagues that have died and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes work opportunities appear there. Media companies use them as a resource to say, we're looking for an advisor on this show or anybody that was involved in this crime and all that kind of stuff. And it's worked for me in the past. Absolutely worked for me. I got a phone call from the chair of the Metropolitan Police Ex-Detectives Association. Now, at least this person had the balls to pick up the phone and call me, and they said, "You have been adjudged to have brought the association into disrepute, so we're kicking you out of that as well."
Oh my God.
Which reminded me of a great Groucho Marx quote. Now, for the youngsters listening, Groucho Marx was part of a comedy trio, him and his 2 brothers, Marx, M-A-R-X, American comedians, very, very funny. And Groucho once said, "I wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have me as a member." Right?
Yeah.
And that kind of sums up my position, really. So it was like, good riddance, ta-da, see if I give a monkey's uncle.
Yeah.
I certainly don't.
Fair play. Well, I feel like because you're going to miss out on that dinner, maybe we should do a happy hour dinner once a year and you can come to that one. You can be in our little club. It's quite a sordid club, isn't it?
He doesn't want to be a part of that.
Oh, you haven't heard what's on the menu yet? It could be something lovely.
Porn stars?
Now, Peter, obviously you've worked in crime your whole life. When we put out a tweet yesterday asking for any questions for your fine self, a lot of people said the same one, and they asked what crime or investigation have you been involved in the past that maybe we would have heard about, or like the most infamous crime, or your biggest crime. What would you say that was?
Well, you see, I spent over 10 years working undercover.
Right, yeah.
So my involvement in certain investigations will have to remain
Oh.
largely a secret, albeit, of course, I pretty much told everything in my autobiography. You know? So the cases that I worked against and the crooks that I went undercover to operate against, you may not have heard of them because they operated successfully.
Right, okay.
As drug dealers, as dealers in stolen art, counterfeit goods and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So those big high profile crimes, I generally speaking was not a part of those. And of course, as I've often said, a famous crook is a foolish crook
Right.
because the establishment will come for you.
Yeah.
Look at the Krays, for example. Okay, they became famous. They got ideas above their station. They became a threat to the very fabric of society because they were acting with impunity, murdering people, and the establishment simply could not allow that to continue.
Mm.
So if you are famous and you're a crook, you are extremely foolish, and the state will bring you down as sure as night follows day.
Well, you're quite famous now. You've been on Channel 4's Hunted, and you're doing bits and pieces all over the gaff. Does that not worry you now then? Because you would have put criminals away back in the day, but now you show your face, and obviously you said in the first episode you went into the witness protection. Do you not feel like that's a risk anymore?
Well, after all those shenanigans and me leaving the force, I sued them. Okay, not very successfully. They settled out of court for 10 grand. So I certainly didn't get any riches out of it, and that wasn't really the point of it. But anyway, as part of those legal proceedings, my lawyers wrote to the Met Police. So this is some years after I've left witness protection, and they asked for a current threat level assessment. In other words, what is the threat against Peter Bleksley here and now? And the Metropolitan Police replied, we find no evidence of any current threat. Now, please remember, you might recall from Series 1, I told you that the people I was operating against would accept payment of guns instead of cash for the vast sums of amounts of drugs they were going to supply to us, right? Terrorism. What I'm saying is, between me being in the witness protection program and then asking for that letter from the police about the current threat against me, the Good Friday Agreement came, and peace largely came to Northern Ireland and the shores of the UK.
Right.
Okay, so I'm just saying there is a possibility that if I had been murdered, that may have been a breach of the Good Friday Agreement.
Oh, okay.
It could have been heavily politicised,
Right.
depending on who, of course, it was that pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that process happened on many, many levels, including me personally. And besides, when I decided then to go public, write my autobiography and all those things, I'd lived enough of my life looking over my shoulder.
Yeah.
That is no way to live. It destroys you. It really wears you down. So I've now decided, and I have done for many years, I live my life looking that way and not behind me.
Right.
Look forward, not back.
I was going to say, based on that, is there any, or are there any stories that you just don't feel like you could mention or say just on the off chance it brings something back up? Or do you feel like pretty much everything's open and out there now?
I am overwhelmingly an open book.
Right.
Overwhelmingly.
That's a good thing then.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It means my soul is lifted and I'm not burdened with anything.
You're free
and
from
I
the
can
shackles of
say
paranoia.
what the hell I like.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've nailed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What types of crime interest you the most? Because I wanted to speak about just your opinions on certain cases and stuff. Ones that perhaps you certainly weren't involved with. So, for example, me and Stevie, like most of the British public, I guess, like watching true crime documentaries and that kind of ingrained morbid curiosity that's within us all, I think, like really comes out when we go on Netflix and stuff. Do you have that? Or because you've seen it, so much of it firsthand, are you just like, can't be arsed with that?
I'm a true crime nut.
Are you?
I love a bit of true crime.
Oh.
And I had the great honour last year of presenting a TV series called New Scotland Yard Files,
Right.
which was all about great detective work in solving murders.
Amazing.
That was a 10-part series on CBS Reality.
Where can we get that now?
For me, it's out there somewhere. So I think CBS Reality have just repeated it. So if you go onto their site, their Twitter feed or something, you can find it somewhere. You can download it, I think, using the Virgin app or something.
Right.
And you can get it. And it's 10 episodes, 10 individual crimes with yours truly presenting it, doing the links, all that kind of stuff.
Amazing.
And,
I'll get on that.
Yeah, it was a good gig and great crimes and wonderful to to revisit the investigations that some of these brilliant detectives did.
Yeah. What crimes interest you the most?
Well, my life is completely and utterly absorbed at the moment with my hunt for Kevin Parle. So, of course, the murders of Liam Kelly and Lucy Hargreaves are what drive me every day. It's what inspires me to get out of bed. It what makes me relentlessly hunt Kevin Parle.
Yeah.
It's for Liam and it's for Lucy.
Right.
This is going to be a really strange comparison. You just mentioned that you're a bit of a true crime nut. This is going to sound weird until I get to the point. I studied animation at uni, so when I watch animations now, I pick out little things that can kind of ruin a film for me or ruin a TV series for me. If you're watching a true crime series, are you not constantly picking at the police work or like being like, this could have been done better?
Yeah, or they'd never do that. That's
Yeah.
No, I'm there to be entertained. So I'm kind of...
So you can shut your brain off.
I enjoy it. I want to see where the investigation went, and if there's any testimony from witnesses, then I make my own personal judgment on the truthfulness of what they're saying or not. What I don't like and what I won't do, and I have turned down some fairly lucrative work, is that I will not glorify living serial killers.
Okay.
Now, there is a fascination, and I understand that, and many people are utterly gripped by serial killers. I'm not a part of that, and I won't be a part of that, whether it be TV, podcasts, whatever, because I do not want my spoken word to be used by some perverse serial killer to gratify themselves in their cell when they are listening, watching, or hearing about themselves.
Fair enough. That's very interesting.
It's not for me.
Yeah. Well, why do you think? Is it just that morbid curiosity that I mentioned? Why do you think people are fascinated by that? Because I was saying to Fiona on the way up, we were speaking about you coming on, and you hear of all these crimes going on all the time. You turn the news on, it's doom and gloom. Turn the radio on, doom and gloom. And I'm somebody that just kind of like, whether this is right or wrong, I'd try and shut all that out and just focus on what I'm doing. But sometimes there's a crime in the news that really gets in my head, and I just have to research it and I have to read everything up. And to name a few, like the Las Vegas shooting and stuff like that, things like that, I'm so curious about them. Is it wrong to be curious about stuff like that, or certain murderers?
No, we live in a flagship democracy. As long as you don't break the law, you're free to research whatever floats your boat. Does nothing for me.
Right.
You know, it does absolutely nothing for me. These multiple murders, those kind of stuff, serial killers, all of that. I will not spend my time researching, writing, broadcasting about them because, as I say, I don't want them gratifying themselves and getting kicks, because some people kill for fame.
Yeah.
They want notoriety.
Do you think maybe, aside from the point you just gave, because you've been involved in police work your whole life and you've kind of blurred the lines between, well, what I'm trying to say is, me and Stevie, like, I'll go on YouTube and I'll watch police interrogation videos like Chris Watts in America and stuff like that, and I'll be absorbed by it. But because you've kind of lived that, does that take away some of that fascination now? When you see these people in the flesh, are you like, fuck that, I don't want anything to do with it?
No, I watch some police shows where the officers are interviewing people.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, haven't you ever been on a course?
Right.
Well, you've just missed the most blatantly obvious question that you should have asked.
Yeah.
You know? And I'll sit there, and of course, excuse me, my wife's a veteran of over 30 years of police work.
Right.
So we might sit there and we are slagging off the investigators who are, you know, conducting a very poor interview with a suspect. And so that kind of, then we just look at each other and realise we're just a pair of old grumps having a moan, you know, because I kid you not, policing is a far more challenging job these days than it ever was in my day.
Me and Jack do the same thing. We watch other people's podcasts, and so don't worry, we all do it.
Okay, my conscience is clear. Thank you very much.
Did you have to interrogate people much, or was that not your?
Well, not during my undercover years,
right? Of course.
But of course, before those years, and after those years, then yes, I spent many a an hour in an interview room.
Well, that fascinates me, and
Questioning
I didn't
a
think we were going to go down this route. But if you don't mind me asking a few questions about that,
Yeah.
I'd love to. How? Because you know people have the right to no comment. In that's so frustrating. As like somebody who watches those interviews, weirdly as an entertainment thing, it's so frustrating when they no comment. But there's a channel I watch on YouTube, as I said, where they deconstruct police interrogations, and they're always videos of people that haven't no commented. Why do people choose not to no comment? Because surely that's the easiest. If they're guilty,
Why do people choose to speak?
sorry, why do they choose to speak? Yeah,
Yeah, well, some people, believe it or not, actually want to tell the truth and confess to their crimes. That does happen.
right.
Okay, so you've got to give people the opportunity to do that.
Mm,
But if you take a classic no comment interview,
yeah.
okay. Now I've been involved in no comment interviews that have gone on for hours.
Is it fucking annoying?
Okay. Yes, but it's more annoying for them. And if you play it properly and you chip away and you chip away and you chip away, then that minute they go, either gives you a window into their soul, which members of the jury you may care to have a look at,
Yeah.
right? Or they just can't stop themselves and bleh, out
Right.
it comes.
Wow.
Yeah, bingo, gotcha, thank you.
Take them away.
This interview is concluded at boom, job done.
When we watch these interrogation, I'm talking more movie scenes than actual video footage on YouTube. How common are the practices that you see for so like good cop, bad cop routine? Is that a common thing?
Yeah, good cop, bad cop is as old as the hills.
Yeah.
But me and a mate of mine used to do bad cop, worse cop. You know, that was back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, and it works because if somebody is being decent towards the suspect and they want to warm to that, you know, they warm to that person and they want to confide in them and not the other cop that they don't like, it doesn't really matter who they confess to.
It almost seems
Confession is a confession.
Do you think me and Jack could make a good team for that? Good cop, bad cop. I'd be good cop. I'd have to be.
what? Then that means I'm bad cop.
Yes, you're much better at being a dick than me.
Tell me the answers, Peter.
Did they ever do a remake of Dumb and Dumber?
Who would be dumber, please? Which one?
No, don't do this.
I feel like I want to interrogate you now, and you can test our skills.
Go for it.
Oh, don't do this.
Yeah, right.
I'm the nice one.
You're good cop. I'm bad cop.
Okay, so
Right.
I'm all right. I've gone to get him a cup of tea or coffee.
Okay, right.
I really need a fag.
Oh, I'll go get you a whole pack. Is that what I've never smoked in my life?
Don't, kids, don't start smoking. It's smelly, it's antisocial, it's life-shortening, and it's expensive.
Peter, you're
Don't
being
be a fool like
interrogated.
me.
You're being interrogated. You shut up, sir. Did you steal the sweets?
No comment.
I don't know where I'll go. I've gone to get him fags still. Here we go. There's your fags. Did you steal the
You
sweets?
can't just ask in a nicer tone of voice.
I can, because he likes me.
Do you think a successful businessman such as myself, self-made man, living in my huge mock Tudor mansion on the borders of Essex with a Mercedes, a Rolls Royce and a Bentley on the driveway, would steal sweets?
You look like a man to me who would like a little extra thrill. A man who would enjoy a porn star, maybe.
But to me, you look like a mug. You stole the sweets.
I don't think we can do it.
No.
It's not for us.
What tactics do we need to be good interrogators?
Many weeks training.
Yeah.
Yes.
Many weeks.
Yeah. We're so far removed from that line of work.
Yes.
Would
Stick to what you're good at, whatever that might be.
We'll find it.
Was you did you say you was the bad cop? Or the worst?
It would vary. It would depend a lot of the time on the prisoner, on the suspect that you were arrested.
Right.
Because some you might be able to chime a bit easier with than others.
Yeah.
Depending on who they were, what their interests were, the nature of the crime.
Mm.
I mean, not. There was a murder that I dealt with many years ago when I was at Kensington. It was a sex worker called Christine Offord, and she was murdered. She suffered a very severe injury to her scalp, but that wasn't fatal. She'd actually been killed by being held up against a hard surface, a wall, and having her throat crushed with a crowbar. And of course, it completely crushed her windpipe, so she couldn't breathe. She was dead. She was a sex worker. She moved in very strange circles, shall we say, for white straight detectives. There were people that with every kind of sexual preference, picadillo that you care to mention. There was a lot of cross-dressing involved and all that kind of stuff. This is the 80s, early 80s. Society was a lot less flamboyant and open and inclusive than it is today. And it was a really strange, murky world that not a lot of us detectives really had a great insight into. But we started by questioning the witnesses, and it became apparent that the day of Christine's murder, there'd been about 13 people in her flat, a basement flat in Kensington. And we chipped away by talking to these witnesses, many of whom we had to get on board. Because there we all were, pretty sharp-suited white boys, going into these people's world, which was so different from ours, and learning along the way. And there was one guy in particular who was gay, cross-dressed, really large kind of fella, painted fingernails, this kind of stuff, just new and like alien to us. And I pretty quickly realized that I needed to get a rapport with this guy. I really needed to get to know him, to understand him, because I thought there were secrets in his head that were going to help us solve Christine's dreadful murder. And I spent days with him, literally, shut away in an interview room, getting him cups of tea, getting to know him, taking background statements, winning his trust, all that kind of stuff. And we eventually got a real rapport going. And it was a result of that he told me 3 words, which essentially unraveled the case. We got the names of the 2 people that we hadn't identified had been at this gathering, this party, right? Bob and Barry. I got the names from him. And then I said, did he know where Bob and Barry came from? And he said, and he didn't know. But I was probing him and encouraging him to search the recesses of his mind to see what he could recall. And then he went, Littlehampton. I heard the word Littlehampton mentioned. And I said, okay, thank you very much. Finished that statement, blah, blah, blah. Sent him off back home for the evening, straight up into the CID office, rang Littlehampton CID. And I said, this is a bit of a long shot here. Explained who I was, a DC from the CID office at Kensington investigating a murder. I said, I've got 3 words for you. Bob, Barry and Littlehampton. Do any of those make any sense to you? And he went, no. He said, can you tell me a little bit more? And I said, well, Christine, the victim, was a sex worker. She catered for many types of preferences that people had. They could indulge themselves in stuff which many might regard as being a bit perverse and all that sort of stuff. And he went, hang on. He said, I've got a guy called Barry who's on bail for sexually assaulting a 13-year-old boy.
Wow.
And I went, okay, tell me more. And he dug out the case papers and talked me through it and all that kind of stuff. And I said, okay, I'll be down there crack of dawn the following morning. Went down there, went into what then they had a guy in a police station called a collator. It's old school. So you literally collated cards, index cards on people, pre-computerization. The computerization was just coming in. And through going through all of that and researching every scrap of information we could, we found out that Barry had an associate called, you got it, Bob. Bingo. We then discovered that they had nicknames, right? Barry the psychopath. Right?
Oh, God.
Okay, right.
God.
This is looking a bit kind of promising here. And his mate Bob was known as Bungling Bob the burglar. Right?
Sounds like a Roald Dahl character.
Okay. Yeah. Right. We're really getting somewhere now. And to kind of wrap up this long story, we ended up nicking Barry and Bob and they were charged with murder, went to the Old Bailey and were duly convicted.
Purely based on those 3 words that guy gave you.
Yeah, and it was only because I invested days in that guy,
Wow.
built up trust with him and a rapport, against the backdrop of my detective inspector going, have you finished with him yet?
Mm.
Come on, we've got a lot to do. Crack on. And I'm going, Governor, just leave me be.
Yeah.
This guy might be extremely important.
Right.
And those days all paid off because I got those 3 words. It unlocked the investigation, essentially.
That must be such a mentally draining job, because I imagine you're trying to whittle this person down and down and down over a course of days, and you don't even know if you're going to kind of uncover that diamond, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? They might actually know fuck all. Like,
Yeah.
How confident are you when you go in to interrogate somebody that they have the information you need?
There's no hard and fast. It
Right.
all depends upon the circumstances, the crime, and what you think that person may or may not be able to tell you.
Right.
But of course, it's like the whole world, isn't it? It's so often about trust in relationships and building trust and getting to know people and spending time with them.
Did you ever build such a rapport and make them feel so trusting in you that you kind of weirdly felt a bit of guilt when you ended up switching, or not? Is that
But
not?
now you're kind of cutting across my undercover career, right?
Yeah.
When I would spend hours, days, and weeks in the company of some people that I really liked,
Yeah.
right?
I
We'd have a drink together, we'd have a laugh together. They thought I was going to be their new business partner, but of course they were operating on the other side of the law.
Hmm.
And so, I operated against so many people who were bright, articulate, clever, streetwise, and if only they had put all their talents towards something else other than crime, they could have been a success.
Yeah. God, yeah, that must be so weird. That shows how dedicated you were to your work, though, to not let them emotions come in. And
It's just being professional, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I was a detective. I was paid by the public to catch bad guys. That was my job. That was my role. It was my calling. It was public service. So,
But you're a very personable person, a very likable person. I can imagine some of the rapport you built with these people were like almost as true a friendship as you can get, apart from that last little detail.
I'm going to dismantle that statement. Very flattering of you to say it, right?
Yeah.
By now, talking about the story with the baby.
Yes.
Because it leads on to that, okay?
Yeah.
Right. A lot of the time, when I was talking to people who came from the drug dealing world, they would big themselves up. They would promise what, frankly, they couldn't deliver. In other words, they might occupy a fairly low position in a drug dealing network. They might serve up ounces, for example, of a class A, heroin or coke or this, that, and the other. They might just be what we would call an ounce man.
Right.
So they serve ounces.
Are these the people at the bottom of kind of like the food chain?
Not the bottom, but they're lower down the pyramid.
Yeah.
If you think of it as a pyramid, they're lower down the rung. And of course, we were always striving to catch people towards the top end of it. Well, I got talking to one bloke, and I was introduced to this bloke who was promising multi-kilos of cocaine. Right? He was a fairly young guy. He was a young guy, and he could talk the talk, but he could not walk the walk. And that became clear after many, many hours of negotiating with him, because he kept insisting. I was gonna buy 100 grand's worth of coke. I think it was 4 kilos or something, right? 25 grand a kilo. Bit of discount because you're buying in bulk, obviously, back in the day, right? 100 grand, 4 kilos. Right?
And then he went to work the next day.
And he was promising, yeah. Well, I had a party at work.
I've got 2 porn stars coming.
A lot of people. Yeah. So this young man is desperate to do this trade, desperate to serve me up with these 4 kilos of coke. But because he's lower down the food chain, so to speak, lower down in the network, he cannot, the man holding the drugs will not release the 4 kilos to him because he thinks he might lose them or get robbed for them or this, that, and the other. And likewise, I'm not going to release the cash. So there he is in the middle trying to put this deal together, but he can't. He is begging me, literally begging me, to give him my 100 grand, and he says, I will be back within the hour, without fail, with your 4 kilos of cocaine. Yeah, righto. Does he think I just floated up the Thames on a water biscuit or something? You know what I mean, right? This is not happening, pal, right?
Yeah.
In his desperation, okay, he said, look, my girlfriend had a baby a month ago. I will leave the baby with you as collateral.
What?
You give me the 100 grand and he will give me the baby to hold, maximum for an hour. Right?
How does that go through someone's brain?
Right? This is how desperate he was to do the deal.
Wow.
You know, he was probably going to earn a very, very sizable drink out of that 100 grand.
Yeah.
You know, and with a new family and all of that, and an unwillingness to get a proper job,
Yeah.
you know, that would have been very useful to him.
Wow.
So talk about me being nice and personable, right? I knew these negotiations were coming to an end, and please, no babies were harmed in the course of this undercover operation. I must make that clear. I'm the father of 3. My youngest 2, I was full-time house husband to while my wife went to work, right? I love a baby.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for a baby, right?
Yeah.
I love babies, but I was playing the role of a hard-nosed drug dealer.
Yeah.
So in the end, I've got the raging up with this bloke, and it's not going to happen. I said, okay. So picture the scene. I said, you give me your baby, right? And you disappear off with my 100 grand, right? An hour later, you have not come back. An hour and a half later, you have not come back. 2 hours later, you have not come back. Do you know what I'm going to do? I said, I'm going to get your baby and I'm going to wring its neck and I'm going to throw it in a skip. And I'll still be 100 grand out of pocket. I think these negotiations are over, aren't they? And he's looking at me, right? He's looking at this bloke that he thinks would be willing to wring his baby's neck and throw it in a skip. Yeah. He never bothered me again.
Oh, Jesus.
So what happened?
You didn't do the deal.
We didn't do the deal.
So he just got away with it, did he?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, we had no evidence. He'd never delivered it.
Oh, right.
To me or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Because of course you can only arrest them.
You could have nicked him for conspiracy to supply drugs, but it
Yeah.
would be a hollow charge because there's no drugs. It would look like it was kind of like, you know, ramped up, and it would end up being my word against him. And I wasn't willing to go and give evidence, you know, against some poor deluded, you know, recent new father who was trying to over promote himself in the world of drug dealing.
Yeah.
I really, really hope that after I'd threatened to kill his baby, he probably thought that drug dealers were not the sort of people he should be hanging around with, and it might have inspired him to go straight and get a proper job and provide for his family. I don't know.
Yeah.
I never saw him again.
Such a strange sentence.
Yeah. We could just clip that out and put that in the trailer so people click on it. After I threatened to kill his baby, that baby grew up to be Stevie White.
Oh.
How is your dad?
What I should say was that for added effect, just so that he got it, right, as he sat in front of me, when I said, I'll wring your baby's neck, it was like, and I'll wring your baby's neck and I'll throw it in a skip.
Yeah.
And he was
Oh, cool.
Anyway.
Gee, that's
and I would
scary.
never dream of doing that, okay? I would never wring a baby's neck and throw it in a skip. Honest. Mum, if you're watching.
I'd love to know what he said to his girlfriend. Just need to borrow the baby for an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leave him with this random bloke. Jesus.
Yeah.
'Cause I guess you can only really arrest somebody once the transaction's been made. Is that correct?
Yeah, you want them to deliver the parcel because therein lies the evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to go to court with some hollow conspiracy where the parcel's not been delivered. That
Yeah.
just-
When you go undercover, I can't remember if I asked you this in the first episode, so apologies if I did, but when you go undercover, are you given like a character profile of who you're going to be?
You create your own.
You do?
Yeah. And I always stuck very close to what I am because the easiest lie is the lie that is closest to the truth.
Okay.
That's the easiest lie to tell, to remember, to maintain.
Mm.
So, of course, my character was an oiky South London bloke.
Yeah.
That's all I was, you know, but I'd made a few quid.
Yeah.
And I made a few quid through whatever means,
Yeah.
you know, whatever I dabbled in. And so I stuck to that. I couldn't suddenly have pretended to be a dealer in fine art, public school educated.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, I'll buy your stolen Rembrandt for £4 million. Yeah.
I don't know. I think you pull it off quite well.
No. It fundamentally wouldn't last because I'd stub my toe and go, fuck it. And that whole demise would all come crumbling down.
Yeah, I quite believed it there. Thought
Yeah,
you
but
can
what I did do, I had a great mate of mine, wonderful undercover cop, and when we went out, he was my uncle, right? So I was his nephew, and we called him the Cashmere King, right?
Right. Sorry, in the role play. That's what.
in the role
Okay.
play, yeah. He was married to a very successful businesswoman, so he could wear clothes that us lowly cops could only dream of wearing. Hence, he had the nickname the Cashmere King.
Right.
He literally wore cashmere and always looked $1 million. And so he could portray the role of somebody, you know, that was well educated, had millions upon millions and all that kind of stuff. But of course, when he was negotiating with the bad guys, he'd often say, I've got this nephew from South London, yeah, who's a proper lively lad. He's pretty handy with his fists and he drives me because he's good to have on side. So I would drive for him. Right?
Oh, right, yeah.
So one day we're going off to do a job, and he's got a lovely car that I'm driving, a Jag or something, and we're going off to meet these crooks who are serving him up with a parcel of whatever it was, and I'm driving, and he said, "Shall I put some music on?" I said, "Yeah, go for it." Right, and we're driving into some less than salubrious kind of area in his Jag, so we're kind of going to stick out a little bit anyway. And he puts fucking opera on. Right? I've gone, what is that? Okay. And this is before the 1990 World Cup, when Luciano Pavarotti suddenly became known to oiks like me. He said, his name is Pavarotti. He's one of the world's finest tenors. I don't care how much he's worth.
I'll give you 20 to turn the fucker off.
Yeah. And so, you know, I got a bit of an insight into opera that day and all that. And the trade went down and the bad guys got nicked and it worked and all of that.
Yeah.
I did, in fact, on one occasion, buy a tile, right, that was like thousands of years old, right? And it got offered for sale. It had been stolen out of a museum.
Like an antique type.
Yeah. I mean, it was literally thousands of years old, and I couldn't see the attraction in it, and it looked to me like a worthless bit of tat.
Yeah.
You know? But anyway, I went and negotiated and successfully bought that, and that was handed over to me in Holland Park, and the guys got nicked, and it was a really important antiquity to certain people.
Oh, so it had been robbed, and,
Yeah.
and that's why you were trying to.
Yeah, and I went in there in my South London guise, but kind of mediating on behalf of someone. I told them I was a middleman.
Oh,
You know,
right.
so you'll have to deal with me.
Yeah, because there'd be
You know,
no
the
reason for you to
the
buy
people
that.
Want it. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't going to, get it and take it to my kind of, mock Bermondsey flat and stick it on the wall or anything like that.
Right, yeah.
It was going to be, as far as the bad guys selling it to me thought, it was going to be returned to some.
It's mad because like every day must have been so different. Like one day you're buying like kilos of cocaine, the next day you're buying an antique tile. Like it's mad. Did you ever mix with kind of like the mafia at all?
Well, I got introduced to an Italian guy in London who was reputed to be a mafiosi, and I took along with me a woman undercover cop who was brilliant and spoke Italian.
Right.
We thought she'd be really good, and I have to say, don't think that this world was dominated by bloke men like me. It wasn't. People from all kind of walks and backgrounds were operating undercover and still are, which is great because that's what crime combating requires. People from all backgrounds to join the police to operate. And there were some really fantastic women that worked undercover, and I worked alongside. Ballsy, courageous, inventive, smart women. And I took one such lady along with me to these negotiations. And it was funny, the mafiosi, right, just would not talk in front of her because he was very old school in that regard. You don't involve women in your criminality. Now, I can kind of respect that. And a lot of British crooks that we operated against, left their wives blissfully ignorant of what they did.
Right.
The wives would never ask, and the men would never tell. So unfortunately, she just wasn't privy to the conversations that we had. But anyway, those negotiations went actually very well. Excuse me while I have a swig.
Did he look like a proper mafia bloke, or is that all movies?
You wouldn't have looked at him twice.
Oh, really?
You would not have looked at him twice.
Yeah.
Skinny, largely nondescript sort of bloke.
Yeah.
A continual air of menace to everything that he said. You could tell there was an undercurrent to him.
Yeah.
You know, there was another kind of, it was always bubbling under.
Right.
But the negotiations were professional. And eventually they took me to this flat way up on about the 4th or 5th floor of a house over near Olympia. And they served up a huge, great parcel. I can't remember. It was multi-kilos of heroin and cocaine and all that kind of stuff. So I came out the flat, you know, gave the signal. In the troops went, you know, the cops smashed the doors in, seized gear everywhere. There was more gear in the loft. They found another address connected to them, and there was more gear there. You know, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of pounds of gear got recovered. And the mafiosi I'd been talking to obviously was nicked. They took his fingerprints and found his real identity, and he was wanted to serve something like 35 years in Italy.
Fuck.
So he did his time in the UK. I think he got about 10 here and probably did half of that, and then was shipped out to Italy to do his other 35 over there.
Fucking hell. And the mafia are so closely connected with everyone else, aren't they? So that must be a scary thing. When you're undercover in a situation like that, and obviously the main goal is to make them believe you are who you're saying you are. Where do you draw the line? I think you asked this last time, Stevie. I just can't remember what you said. Where do you draw the line when it comes to them trying to get you involved in doing certain things? So
like smoking a joint or doing a line of Charlie,
yeah,
or jumping into bed with a female member of the criminal
yeah.
fraternity. Right. Okay.
It sounds like you just listed things you've done.
Point number one.
Moving on.
Point number one, not to be forgotten, right? When you are negotiating with some very serious people from the world of crime, you do not want to be off your nut.
No.
You want to be very much aware of what's going on. You want your peripheral vision operating at absolute maximum, so you are aware of the surroundings, what's in front of you, what's there, and you are ever mindful to any potential danger, because you are in a world full of potential danger. That's not to say that I didn't smoke the joint or I didn't do a line of coke, but I would only ever do it if it was a deal breaker.
Yeah.
In other words, if I didn't smoke that joint to utterly convince the bad guys that I was a bad guy myself, right, then I'd go, yeah, all right, hand it here. But what I would do in those circumstances, and I did this on a number of occasions, is they've pulled out the skins, right, pull out the papers, they put out the bit of resin or the bit of herb or whatever it is, and I go, here, give me that, right? And I would put the joint together, right?
Yeah.
And I could build a brilliant 3-skin, 5-skin. I was very inventive, right?
Yeah.
I could build a joint like you wouldn't believe, okay? But what I would do was I would backload it, right? So I would put the gear towards the back end of the joint, right? Where the roach is, the bit that you stick in your mouth and smoke.
Oh.
So the front end of the joint, right, where you put your little twist and you light it,
Yeah.
I would leave about 1/2 inch of that, right, without any gear in it.
Yeah.
And I would go, he who made it can start it,
Yeah.
right? So I would not only put it together, I'd go bang, shove it in my mouth, spark it up, smoke the first 1/2 inch, and I've not put any gear in that first 1/2 inch.
Oh, so you've still
Right?
got yeah.
Now, of course, there will be an element of being stoned because you're inhaling smoke that is going through the other gear
Yeah.
as it travels down the joint and gets to you.
Yeah.
Right? But you are not going to be hanging. You are not going to be completely, stoned within
Yeah.
the first kind of bang on it.
Right. How'd you do that with a line of coke?
So, right, you asked the question, right?
Yeah.
I was also very adept with a credit card.
Yeah.
Right? So I could shape lines of coke into people's initials. Right. What's your name? And they'd say, Jim. and I would carve them a very nice looking J, right?
Yeah.
And I'd go on in, go on, get on that then, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd say, no, I'm driving later, and I hate the paranoia when I'm driving when I've had a line of gear, you know. It doesn't work for me and all that sort of stuff. So I'll take that as a sample. Thank you very much. This is going to be the same gear as what you're going to serve up to me, is it? Because if this is jank, you know we're not going to be having a trade here, don't you? Right?
Yeah.
So I'll take that as a sample, and I'll bang on it when I get home.
Right.
Lovely.
Oh.
Thank you very much. But occasionally,
Yeah.
it would be, right, you've got to do it. Right?
Wow.
We want you to have that line of gear. Number one, to prove that you're not Undercover Old Bill.
Yeah.
Because Undercover Old Bill will never take a line of gear.
Yeah.
You know, whether I had one of my tantrums or not would be another matter, because, you know, no two circumstances were the same.
Yeah.
So if in the end, I get that £10 note, right, have a line of Charlie, right, I'd do it if it was going to be a deal breaker.
Yeah.
But on those occasions, right, when I've done it and I come out and there might have been a drink involved and this, that and the other, I get out, I'd speak to my cover officer, so that's the guy who's kind of, you know, your link, your communication, and I would say, I am not coming back to the office for a debrief.
Because it won't be brief.
Yeah, no way whatsoever. It will have to wait till the morning.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
I'll speak to the governor in the morning. And can somebody come and drive me home?
do you almost have, is it kind of like a list of kind of unwritten rules of what you can and can't do? Because obviously that makes sense. Like in that context, like doing that bit of drug or whatever, that makes sense to get the end goal, which is to putting them criminals away. But obviously it goes without saying, you're not going to cut someone's finger off, or you're not going to like strangle someone with a crowbar. So like, is it all just having your wits about you and being sensible about each case, or is there a do and don't?
Essentially, the main rule for me back in the day was that you cannot act as an agent provocateur. In other words, you cannot bully, persuade, convince somebody to do something that they otherwise would not do.
Right.
Okay? So they've got to be utterly willing participants in whatever conspiracy it is.
Yeah.
You mustn't goad them on to do something beyond what they are willing to do.
Yeah.
And that's really important. Otherwise you can, you know, do all that undercover work, spend all those weeks and months getting the case together, only to go to court and the judge rule that actually you provoked them into doing it, and it all gets slung out of court.
Oh, right. Fair enough.
I was going to say, I feel like we've pushed aside the part where you said jumping into bed with the bad women.
You don't want to let that go, do you?
Ladies and gentlemen, after the advert, Blex has a shame.
I get the leaving half and not smoking it, but I can't think of a situation where you're forced. Oh, go on. If you don't do that, you're definitely a policeman.
I find it's probably a bit of a like a childish question, but like with the weed and the coke, that's something you can pretty much like pick up and put down and do it for the greater good. What about if it's something like heroin? Whether like, or would the drug dealers not want you to do that?
Yeah, well, no, and I wouldn't do it, but I knew my way around heroin very, very well. I knew what smelt, I knew what good gear smelt like, I knew what jank gear smelt like, and I had a very unscientific way of testing it. So what I would do, if they're bringing a sample of the heroin, okay, I would scoop out a sample, weigh it, right, then burn it on foil with a lighter underneath it, right? Keep it away from you, because you don't want to be inhaling it, because that is, you know, the dragon that people chase, that old expression, chasing the dragon, right? So burn it away from you on the foil, right? It bubbles off. And it was pretty accurate. You could then look at the residue and see how good the gear was.
Wow.
Right? If there was very little burnt residue left on the foil, you knew that most of the heroin had burnt, so consequently it was pretty good gear.
Right.
If you then look at the foil and it's just black and not a lot has actually, you know, burnt off, then you go, I'm not overly, you know, I don't reckon that's overly good gear, to be honest with you.
And you need to know if it's good or not, because you are this gangster that's coming in to buy good stuff.
I knew my gear better than any other undercover cop in the country.
Really?
Right? End of. I knew my way around a bit of gear like very few people other than criminals.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew my gear inside out because I was buying it every day of the week.
Yeah.
So, of course, I knew what was jank and what was good.
Wow.
I knew what a bit of Peruvian flake looked like if it was good. I knew what Cremo gear was, and I actually prided myself when it came to cocaine that if when the parcel got seized, it was less than 95% pure, I had failed. I had let myself down massively.
So
I only bought good gear, and I would walk away from trades if people brought me a sample and it was jank,
Yeah.
or if they'd bring a parcel and I thought it was jank, I'd walk away.
Wow.
I'd say I only deal in Cremo gear.
Because even though you want to catch the crooks, you also don't want to be seen as a mug that would buy shit.
Because then they're going to come along and they're going to bash you over the head and they're going to rob your money.
Yeah.
You know, you're laying yourself open to be regarded as being not top drawer.
Yes.
And if you're not top drawer, then people might be tempted to arm themselves and come and bash you over the head.
So not only have you got to play the role of a crook, you've got to be the worst crook. That's mad. You've got
to be
the best. The best crook. Yeah.
You've got to be the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A gun and a bucket of piss. I said I was going to come to you with that one.
This is the one I'm most intrigued for. I think.
Yeah.
You don't want the shagging story, do you?
I felt like we'd gone over it. If you want to tell us, I am more than keen to hear that.
Right, the gun. Okay.
We'll save it for the end, though.
Yeah.
I will come back to that question.
Anybody in a rush? We're not in a rush, are we?
No.
Right.
We've got all
okay.
day.
Okay. My first tour as a detective was in Kensington in West London, okay, from 1982 to 1985. From Kensington, I went to the Central Drug Squad at the Yard. Now, at Kensington, there was a lot of fraud, okay? Back in the day, checkbook fraud and credit card fraud. Crimes that are not perhaps as prevalent today as they were back then, certainly different, but a lot of fraud. Ken High Street was one of the go-to places for shopping, right? It's sadly fallen from grace these days, and it's a shallow reflection of what it used to be, sadly. So Ken High Street was the place to be, lots and lots of fraud, and we dealt with those cases as detectives in the CID office. Right. A year later, I'm at the Yard. My undercover career is going pretty well. Everybody knows that I've got a penchant for being a professional liar, and I get introduced to these bunch of crooks, and they are going to supply me with cocaine, substantial quantities of cocaine. Now, I'd kind of rewritten the non-existent rule book when it came to working undercover. Because when I first went up there to the Yard, they were very fixed in their ways. Generally speaking, an undercover cop would wear a smart suit, would go to his mate, the jeweller in Hatton Garden, and borrow a lot of jewellery, you know, and a big chain and all that kind of stuff, and sit in a hotel, restaurant or bar, dripping with gold, looking like a successful, possibly overweight sort of white bloke, you know. Well, these criminals are not fools, you know. And as the cocaine explosion in the UK happened, you know, and drugs were freaking appearing from everywhere and everybody's getting on board it, the bad guys sussed out that if a bloke wanted to meet you in a hotel bar and he was wearing a sharp suit and dripping in gold, chances were he was an undercover cop. And if he wouldn't move from that bar, okay, then he's probably an undercover cop. And if he only wanted to do the trade in a hotel room, he's probably an undercover cop. And I was watching this from the outside in my early days of being at the Yard. And I'm going, this is wrong. You know, we've got to change this. We've got to modernise the craft of working undercover. We've got to move with the times. And I was extremely fortunate to work with some wonderful bosses who trusted me. So I would say to them, why are these undercover guys so fixated about doing their negotiations in a hotel bar? Why don't we go somewhere of the bad guys choosing where they feel comfortable? Because this is what they want. And they're not making those meets in the bars now. They won't come and meet the UC guys because they're smelling a rat.
It's too cliche.
Yeah. And the bosses backed me, right? And it was a bit of a nightmare for kind of like, you know, my DI, because he'd be terrified and I'd give a signal. I'd say, stand the surveillance down. I don't mind where I'm going. And I went to some very dark and dingy, dangerous places, which brings us back to the gun and the bucket of piss, right? So on one such operation, the bad guys said, no, we've got a restaurant that we use and we want to talk to you about the trade there. Fine. Don't care where it is. I'm not, I'm fine. Okay, let's go. Right. Jump in the back of their car, right? So on their terms, going to their ground to discuss the trade. And I'm happy as Larry with it, right? We go down some basement steps to this restaurant, and standing on the door is an enormous great lump, right? Is your typical kind of boneheaded doorman that irritates you a bit the minute you see him. I got particularly irritated by this twat because as I walked past him, he just pulled the lapel of his jacket open an inch or two so I could see the butt of the gun that he had in the shoulder holster. Right? Okay. All right, mate. You're the big hard guy, aren't you? You know what I mean? That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I didn't freaking say it.
Yeah.
That's quite a cliche thing to do as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was literally.
Oh, God.
All right, you condescending dick. So what?
Yeah,
Right? Yeah. All right. Okay. Fine. But So we go into the restaurant and we sit down, and my heart sinks, and my arse starts to twitch because the waitress in the restaurant is a woman that about 9 months earlier I arrested for credit card fraud in Kensington
No way.
as a suited detective constable from the CID office.
Oh.
And now I'm pretending to be a drug dealing gangster in a restaurant where she's working as the waitress. This is not going well. I've got a guy on the front door with a gun, and I've got this waitress coming to our table now who is probably going to recognise me and blow my cover completely. I'm in a bit of danger here. So as she approached the table and she came to this side, what I did was I kind of like put my hand up there, sort of shriveled into my shoulder as much as I could. Put my hand there, just trying to look a bit relaxed and disinterested, covering as much of my face as I possibly could. And she said to the others, what you having? What you having? She said to me, what you having? What he's having. 3 words, that was it. Just, yeah. I didn't want what he was having. It didn't really matter, right? I was just having what he's having.
Yeah.
And suffice to say, I hurriedly conducted those negotiations, which were all a bit tense, and they called on the gear. The gear was actually delivered to outside that restaurant, right? But I extricated myself from that restaurant because I said, I've got to go and get the money, right? So I went to get the money, gave the signal. My colleagues, the cops, jumped out, jumped on the car, took the gear, seized the gear, arrested people. But there's a huge frigging commotion going on, right? People have realised that it's cops and they're nicking people outside this restaurant. The entire house, the block above it, was owned by people connected to the restaurant, the guy on the door with a gun, the drug dealing criminality that they're up to. And they just so happened, and don't ask me how, they had a bucket of piss, which they launched out the window over my colleagues as they're nicking the guy and seizing the drugs.
What?
They went frigging Garrity because they all stank of piss.
Oh, it's like being at V Festival.
And I was legging it up the road, right? Job done.
Yeah.
Got away with it. Didn't get shot by the doorman. Didn't get a bucket of piss thrown over me. Gear is seized. People are nicked. I've escaped. Job done. I'm going for a drink.
You had the perfect day apart from that woman clocking you, or almost clocking you.
Mate, that was the closest I'd ever got to, having my cover completely blown.
What do you reckon would have happened if she'd have, in that situation, if she'd have gone, oh, I know you are?
I wouldn't be doing Jack's Happy Hour podcast.
Really?
That's the worst part.
Yeah. Not to have a long and fruitful career, just that you wouldn't be on this podcast. Well, I've got the 20 pence piece one there, and I had a thing that I wanted to go on from that, but I can't remember. This is it, yeah. So now you've had a whole career doing this, and you've seen it on the front line, so to speak. If you were now to walk through London city centre or whatever, if that's a thing, the whole city, how easily would you be able to go, they're up to something, they're drug dealing? Like, can you see them red flags all over the place?
I'm sure I could if I was bothered to look.
Yeah.
But I don't have a warrant card anymore.
No.
I've got other stuff to be getting on with.
Yeah.
And,
But they stick out to you a bit more than they would.
Drugs are everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah.
Drug dealing's everywhere. We discussed it last time I was on the pod. My thoughts on that are very well known. Drugs are anywhere. I'm sure we could stroll 10 minutes from here and be served up a bit of gear of whatever description we wanted.
Yeah, fair enough. What's the 20 pence piece story?
Okay. Right. I'm at the peak of my powers as an undercover cop, and other forces around the country are setting up their own undercover units, mirroring what we at Scotland Yard had done. And one of those forces who were real visionaries was Greater Manchester Police. They come in for an awful lot of criticism these days, that particular police force, right? This is back in the 80s. And in many regards, they left us standing in the Met. They were better resourced, had better premises, and ran a very, very tight ship back in the day. So I get invited up because they're running their first training course. So I get invited up as an observer to watch their course to see if there's anything I can contribute to it, if there's anything we can take from their training and bring back to down to ours in the Met. So I said to the guy running the course, I said, look, I don't want to be some kind of, jumped up observer sitting on a chair in the back of the classroom, because these are undercover blokes and women that I'm invariably going to be working with, because we worked with, our colleagues from around the country and abroad.
Yeah, for sure.
I said, so I don't want a like me and us kind of situation. So I said, any practical situation I want to be a part of. I want to get my hands dirty. I want to muck in. So please, allow me to do that. And they said, fine. Anyway, one night, the guy running the course says, okay, everybody, it's been a really tough week and a half so far. To reward you all, we're going out for a few drinks and a curry tonight. Whee! I'm right up for that. But I didn't say anything because I smelt a very large rat. We go out. We have the curry, right? It's all lovely and it's jolly. And then we're having a couple of beers afterwards. And all of a sudden, this kind of extremely professional and somewhat conservative, with a small c, senior boss who's in charge of their unit is encouraging everybody to drink like the apocalypse is going to arrive tomorrow. Right? And he's buying another round. And he's buying another round. And it's gone midnight. And I'm going, I know what's going on here. I know exactly what's going on here. So I got myself a pint of water on the QT, of course, because I was still part of the crowd. Hey, jolly, 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 jolly. I'm not going to say anything to the students because that's unfair. We fell into our beds about 1:30, and most of them were absolutely bollocksed, right? And had a good night. 3:30. Everybody up! Everybody up! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Right? Doors coming off their hinges, right? Here we go, right? So everybody's had 2, maybe 3 hours sleep, top whack, right? Well, you got 20 minutes. This was not The Apprentice, by the way. It wasn't. Alan Sugar didn't pick up the phone, right? Okay. You got 20 minutes. Get ready. Downstairs. Boom. So we get downstairs. We are all stripped, searched, right? And everything is taken off us. Everything. We have nothing apart from the clothes that we're standing up in, right? We are then blindfolded and put in the back of a van, right? And off we go. We've got absolutely nothing on us apart from the clothes we're wearing. Blindfolded, off in a van, right? It's about 4:00, 4:30 in the morning. People are dropped off. The van stops. So-and-so out the van. So-and-so out the van. Dropping people off at stages. At one point, I could hear an airport. I went, that's an airport. Because you're trying to figure out where you're going. You're trying to work out, am I on a motorway? What direction are we going? All that kind of stuff. Your brain's constantly thinking because we've no idea what's going to happen to us. No idea whatsoever. So eventually, I'm last out, right? Stop the van, come out. I'm given a little strip of paper like that with a 20 pence piece sellotaped to it, right? And a set of instructions, right? You cannot contact anybody you know, and if you do, you'll be booted off the course and your undercover career will be over. You are not allowed to steal. You can beg. Beg? Fucking beg. I'm one of Scotland Yard's primo frigging undercover cops who's normally sashaying around in Porsches with 100 grand in the boot, and you're telling me I can frigging beg for me dinner? Right? I'm not happy. Right? I'm genuinely not happy. So anyway, and there I am, right? In the middle of nowhere. Burley under Wharfdale, it was called, where they dropped me off. Right? I've never been back there since, right? Can't break the law. Bollocks. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, right? And I'm gagging for a drink.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to the firm of solicitors whose pint of milk I stole from their front step, right? Because I did. I had a look. I wasn't going to steal a pint of milk from one of the houses, right? Because people have got to have their cup of tea. But it's a firm of solicitors, and I'm a cop. So I didn't really hold solicitors in very high regard, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm having their pint of milk, right? So I go, nick the pint of milk, find a churchyard, sit in there, drink that. Felt a lot better. You know, that's breakfast for me. I was sorted. I felt right as rain. Can't break the law. Can't contact anybody you know. Right. I'm on a Manchester course. So if I get kicked off a Manchester course for breaking the rules, I figured out that's not going to impact upon my career as an undercover cop for the Met Police.
Yeah.
Right. The Met are going to have a bit of a laugh and a joke about it if I get kicked off the course. Right. Anyway, we were told that we would be being kept under surveillance, right? Well, I'd figured out they can't keep us under surveillance, all of us, all the time, right? They simply didn't have the resources. Anyway, I then go and do a bit of anti-surveillance, right? I know how to conduct anti-surveillance to make sure that I'm not being followed, right? And I was not being followed, right? A mate of mine, great mate of mine, I know has got a girlfriend that lives in Lancashire, right? He met her on holiday. He's a Londoner, but she's from Lancashire. They were having a bit of an on-off sort of thing, blah, 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 blah. I'd met her when she come down to London, got on famously with her. She had a real sense of humour, blah, blah, blah. So I ring my mate with the 20p, right? Okay. So I ring him and I said, look, are you still in touch with her? Blah, 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 blah. He said, oh, yeah. So, right, this is where I am, right? Ring her. This is the telephone number of the phone box. Get her to ring me now, please, right? I was very fortunate. She was at home. She picked up the phone. She rang me at the phone box. I said, please come and get me, right? Okay. And she did, right? And she bought me a few quid, right? And she took me for lunch, right? Okay, right? Meanwhile, all these other poor buggers that have been dropped off and are on this course and their undercover careers depend upon it are eating food out of bins, right? Are begging. They are walking like mile upon mile upon mile. They're getting blisters.
Hungover as well.
Draggled. They are in a complete 2 and 8. They really are. Right. There was a rendezvous point. We were given a rendezvous point and time. So anyway, she drops me off in Manchester. She drops me off early, way before the meeting time. So I am now right as rain. I've had a lovely lunch. I've spent lovely time with my mate's girlfriend who spoilt me. I've got cash in my pocket. You know, not a huge amount, but a few quid. And I've got a couple of hours to kill. Well, back in the day, I used to like to bet on the horses or the dogs, right?
Yeah.
Don't do it, kids. It's a waste of money. You never see a skint bookie. Trust me, right? Yeah. So I go into the bookmakers, right? And there's some dog racing going on in the afternoon. I thought, I fancy that dog. Check the form, this, that, and the other. But fortune favours the brave. Had a couple of quid on that, 7-2. Bang! I've won another 7 quid, right? Happy days, right? Well, seeing as I'm here, now I'm still way ahead of the meet time. Let's have another look at that dog. Quite fancy that 4-1 chance. Yeah, I think I have 3 or 4 quid on that. Boom! In comes the fucking...
Best day of your life.
Dog, right? I'm having an absolute time of my life. I really am, right? So, killed the time. Cash. I am utterly made up. And we go to the rendezvous point with these poor bastards, right? Okay. They were absolutely out on their asses, these people, right? They'd had the most torrid, horrible time, quite literally eating out of bins, some of them, right? So I've gone, because I'm holding, aren't I? I'm all wedged up. So I've gone, 3 quid for you, 3 quid for you, 3 quid for you, 3 quid for you. And they're all looking at me like I'm the Messiah. Right. Off you go and get a bit of grub, get a drink, go on, sort yourself out, go on, we've got 10 minutes before they're here. This, that and the other. They freaking adored me. Of course, it wasn't over. It's an undercover call, so you know there's going to be another kind of, slippery trick being played on us. And they turn up because, and everybody, they're all thinking that it's over, and I knew it wouldn't be. And we then had about another freaking 6 miles to march and all that stuff.
Fucking hell.
Get back. And they were just trying to break people.
Yeah.
Absolutely break people.
Yeah.
Of course, I'd had so much dough that I had a packet of 20 cigarettes, so anybody wanted a fag, you have a fag. They've had cash, they've eaten as a result of that, they've had fags.
Time of your life.
The lot. And we wander back to the headquarters at the end of the operation. By now, it's very late at night. These youngsters are completely done in. And I'm fresh as a daisy. Right? I've had a lovely day. And the guy who was running the course looked at me and he knew that I'd had him over. He knew it. Right? He absolutely knew it. And the disdain that he had for me as he looked at me, right, was just clear for everyone to see. But you can't prove it, pal. I have just taken the piss out of you and your course, but you can't prove it. Right?
And then he found the betting slip, and then he knew.
Well, I think he read my autobiography a few years later, in which that story features. And the feedback was he wasn't overly impressed, but he had begrudging respect for me. But that night, he knew I'd taken the mickey, and fair play. There was no point in him confronting me because I was never going to confess. He got a crate of beers out for everybody, and he nicknamed me the Great Provider.
That's amazing.
And
that's amazing.
And that was it. So,
brilliant story. What
best
is
day I've ever had on 20p.
What is that course meant to teach you? Just how to do shit hungover?
Yeah, but there was all the stuff about the undercover training as well, of course. But that day was specifically designed to break people.
Right.
Just to see if you're too weak and you shouldn't be there.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. What a great story. I think we'll end the first part of the show there. When we come back, I want to ask Mr. Bleksley what it's like to, or how I can go on the run. I want some tips. If you might not want to give them to me because you're on the other side, aren't you? You're the...
Well, if you want to go now, we'll crack on with part 2 of that.
We'll give you 20p and you can make a move.
Yeah, 20 quid, go as far as you can, mate.
And we'll also be discussing Peter's new book, Manhunt, Hunting Britain's Most Wanted Murderer, in great detail. So come back for that. See you in a bit. Hello, guys, and welcome back to Jack Mate's Happy Hour. Whew. That was an intense first part of the show.
It was. But stories like that are insane. And also, what I'm quite intrigued by is, I'm assuming you've told these stories time and time again, but every time you tell them obviously so well. But like, the stories you have to tell are so intense and so good. We're still living off the whole Machine Gun Kelly thing.
Yeah.
Like, our stories are nothing in comparison. And I get excited telling little stories like that. So do you still get like a rush when you tell people these stories, when you see them experiencing it for the first time as well?
It's deeply flattering if people listen to them and enjoy them. That's a great thing, isn't it? I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, and like we were saying, it's great not to badmouth any guests, but because you have so many stories, it's such a pleasure for us to be able to just chat to you. It's almost not even like an interview, is it? It's just like sitting around and hearing some cool stories.
Without 2-for-1 cocktails, right? And because I'm not letting that rest.
I was going to say.
I'm not letting that go, right? Okay. Now, you did say earlier on, and the audience are my witness, that if I come back for part 3, there will be 2-for-1 cocktails.
There will be 2-for-1, but you're not going to leave empty-handed, because I did actually get you in your book. You talk about you like a glass of red wine. You mentioned at the start, and I got you a bottle of red wine just for being such a great guest.
Wow!
So there you go. Thank you for coming on twice now.
So that's very kind of you.
So you don't leave completely empty-handed, but next time it will be 2 porn stars.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So
for starters, I have a voracious appetite.
I've been on almost 100 times. Never once been given a drink.
I give you water every week. Every single week, you come and you get a bottle of Buxton.
That's my own water, and I buy them. I buy the bottles every week.
You buy them, you bring them, you pass them to me. I'll take them out and I give them to you.
Great.
Don't act like I don't treat you well.
I'm underappreciated.
I'll give you a cuddle later. All right.
Do you want my agent's telephone number?
I need something.
I want you to have his numbers. You can fuck off. Peter, on the run, right? That's been a theme of your life. You're now searching for Kevin Parle, which we'll get onto. You were commanding officer on Channel 4's...
Chief.
The chief.
I was the chief.
You were the chief on Channel 4's Hunted. You're very knowledgeable in that field, I would imagine. Is it possible for somebody who is living their life on the run, would you say, to have a normal life?
There is always that element, that fear of the knock on the door.
Mm-hmm.
And fugitives that have been on the run for any number of years will tell you that. There's a book by a guy called Eddie Mayer. The book's called Fast Eddie. He went on the run and tells his story. Some 20 years. Went to America, reinvented himself a number of times.
Wow.
Eventually got undone because he had a fallout with his daughter-in-law and she knew his background.
Oh, you mentioned that in this book, don't you?
She went to the cops.
Yeah.
And he talks about it there. It's an interesting read. I got a bit fed up because Eddie has a bit of a woe is me kind of tone to the book, but it's still a good, for a true crime fan. It's me here to talk about my own book, and I'm plugging other people's books. Generous sort, me. But he speaks about it, and many other fugitives. I mean, just recently, a guy called Christopher Guestmore Jr. was on the run for 16 years. And got caught in Malta last year.
Wow.
Deported back to the UK. He's now awaiting trial for an horrific murder. We'll see whether he's convicted of that or not. It'll be interesting to hear what he might have to tell the court or anybody else about his time on the run. And a guy called Mark Fitzgibbon got arrested only last month flying into John Lennon Airport in Liverpool. And he'd been on a fugitive for 16 years, bizarrely.
Jesus.
And he got captured. So they'd be good people to talk to about that whole sort of life on the run thing. Although I, of course, have some experience of that looking over your shoulder when I was in witness protection. It wasn't the law I feared. It was the assassin's bullet that I was afraid of.
Right.
So there are common strands there of that always looking over your shoulder.
Which one of those two things do you think's worse? Which one would you rather be running from?
Generally speaking, the cops won't shoot you.
Yeah.
So,
but then at least if you get a bullet in the head, how much do you really know about that? Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you get caught by the law, you've got to spend the rest of your days behind bars.
But they could catch you and torture you. So it might not just be
I think if I was running from either, I'd rather be running from a bullet. Because then once you're caught, it's it, isn't it? I hate the thought. I get paranoia just thinking of the police wanting to get you. I couldn't think of anything worse than being stuck behind bars for the rest of my days. I really couldn't. I'd rather you put a bullet in my head.
My 17-year-old said that the other day. He said his greatest fear in life is going to prison. I said, well, don't break the law.
That's an easy one.
And it's really simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just don't break the law. So I told him to put the AK-47 down, flush the gear down the toilet.
Stop ringing the baby's neck.
Stolen car. Oh, yeah. Role model.
I think it's a bit of... what they call it when it's a fear that's not really going to happen, an irrational fear. Yeah. But an irrational fear of mine is like going to prison for a long time for something I didn't do. Like we had Raphael Rowe on, didn't we, recently? He went to prison for 12 years for a murder he didn't do. Like
Horrific.
I couldn't imagine anything worse. I was talking to you in the first bit of the show about I watched these police interrogation things, and I was telling Robbie actually in the pub the other night. I watched this one where this guy, he murdered this woman, and I just want to put it on record. Like, obviously, I do not empathise with this guy at all. He's a murdering cunt, basically. But there was this moment, like, basically, he'd done it in a blind fit of rage, so it wasn't like a meticulously planned murderer goes out and does it for pleasure. It was like in a moment of rage. I think it was his girlfriend. And then he was in this interrogation room, and he was denying the whole thing, but you could tell just by looking at him, even I could tell as a viewer, you're guilty, because he's so nervous. You can tell he feels guilt and whatever, and I'm not excusing what he did. He deserves to go to prison forever. But then they crack him, and the detectives get him, and he admits it a couple of hours in. There's a little time code in the corner, and they go, okay, well, we've got what we need. We're going to just go out. You sit here for a bit. And he goes, am I going to go to prison for life? And they go, well, that's genuinely what would happen in this situation, but you've got a court case to go to now. And they leave the room, and he just starts scratching at himself and like looking at the walls. And I thought, what is going through your head in that moment? Can you imagine being in that room thinking, I came in here expecting to bullshit my way back out again, and I am never ever going to leave these walls. That is just one of my deepest fears. What would you see in interrogations when you crack someone? Do you see the moment the cogs start turning in their head and that realization sets in?
Well, a lot of the time you're referring what they say against the evidence you've gathered. So you're testing the truthfulness or of what they're saying.
Okay.
And so by then questioning their testimony again and possibly again, you try to create those cracks in their story, break the story down bit by bit, and get to a place where you can put all the evidence in front of a court and hopefully the jury will return the correct verdict. That's what you're trying to do.
Couldn't think of anything worse. Whoa, it's made me feel a bit spooked now. But we're talking about on the run, and a question you might not want to answer is what are some common fuck-ups that people make when they're on the run that inevitably lead to their capture? I don't know how much you want to give away here, because, I mean, if Kevin Parle is listening, you don't really want to give him tips, do you, to evade your capture?
The lure of home and loved ones is very, very strong. See, initially when somebody commits a crime, they will want to take themselves as far away from the scene, as far away from the force that might be investigating them as possible. So they tend to travel a considerable distance. But we're human, and often fugitives long for home. They long for familiarity. And some fugitives over the years have been caught quite literally just round the corner.
Really?
Where they may successfully have lived for some considerable time.
Wow.
And others, of course, go and disappear, like those couple of cases, I mentioned earlier. But you see, Fitzgibbon was captured flying back into Liverpool Airport, and he was Liverpool born and raised.
Right.
So maybe that lure of home became so strong for him, or maybe he just got worn down, frazzled by all those years of looking over his shoulder.
I imagine it's something that's super, super hard to keep up for them amount of years. Do you think they probably start really... What's the word I'm looking for? Like, really, the paranoia makes them go far away and they try everything they can. And then do you think after years they become more lax with it, and that's usually when they end up fucking up?
I've got to be careful that I don't give broad generalizations here, because I think different fugitives do it in different ways and however suits them. I think with somebody like Kevin Parle, for example, I think it is highly likely that he has a network of people who support him, who harbour him, who fund him, whether that be a broad network or perhaps a more smaller and secure network. But I don't think he's living the high life.
No.
Because, of course, if you go to fancy restaurants and fancy bars and glitzy nightclubs, people have got their phones out. There's CCTV. You're going to get seen. You're going to get spotted. You're going to get captured. So I think, well, we shall see. I've got to be pretty cautious with what I say. I've absolutely told the truth in Manhunt. And forgive me for holding it up.
No.
This was published yesterday. And this is my life's work.
Yeah.
Finding Kevin Parle is my life's work. It is what I will be dedicated to as long as I'm drawing breath, can put one foot in front of the other, and can bash a keyboard. I will never give up hunting Kevin Parle.
Yeah, I've got to say, you were kind enough to send me an early proof of the book, and I got through it through many bubble baths. That's when I tend to read a book, and the running theme throughout it is certainly your dedication to the cause. You've which we will go through in great detail. But before we do, could you go on the run, do you think?
Yeah, quite easily.
Because you know what to do and what not to do.
Quite easily. And if and when Channel 4's successful show Hunted comes back, and a celebrity version of that comes back, and they invite me onto it, they ain't going to find me.
Yeah. Would you do the show, would you?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But they wouldn't find me.
It's the one show that I would absolutely love to do. Would you?
I don't think I'd be very good.
Me and
I don't
you-
think we'd be good.
Why don't we apply? Happy hour hosts on the run.
They said celebrity.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it rules me out at all.
I'll do it alone.
when on that show, I think one of the officers on there said that when people go on the run, it's never truly random where they go. That's got to be bollocks, isn't it? Like, what if I imagine if I went on the run today and you had to try and catch me, you can make it random by throwing a dart at a board, can't
Yeah,
you?
but I assume your brain might jump to, I know this route. Like in London, for instance, you'll go to, first thing you'll probably do from here is go straight to Highbury Underground because, that's the quickest way to get somewhere far away. So you've already taken away that randomness by going straight to the closest underground station.
But if I go to Highbury and then I go to a certain part of London I've never been before.
But would you? Would you want to just because all you're going to do is come out in an area in London and go, now I don't know where to go.
But I'm saying you could do because these were saying on the show that there's no truly random. I've never been to Plymouth. I've got no connection to Plymouth. I don't support the football team. I don't know anyone from there. If I go to Plymouth, that's random, innit?
Yeah, but
Where are you going to sleep?
Yeah, what they're saying is that you don't choose to go there.
I'll get a sleeping bag
And sleep where?
in a field.
How long for?
Ages.
What?
It's not sustainable.
No, I think the point
you
they're
can't
getting.
do it on your own. You have to have support.
If me
You
and
have to have a
Stevie
network.
went on the run now and you gave us 24 hours to get away,
Yeah.
you with the tools that you have now,
Yeah.
would you back yourself in easily being able to find us?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I'd back him as well.
Undoubtedly.
Oh God.
I think it's possible to be random. Of course, it's feasible, but you wouldn't because you want something that you think you're comfortable, and your brain's probably not as smart enough to think, they won't check that. 'Cause
Yeah.
they will.
Right. Well, when Peter successfully gets Kevin Parle, which he inevitably will, and your life frees up a bit, well, I'll get a brand to chuck us all a bit of budget, and me and you can fuck off on the run, and we'll film it and see how quickly you can get.
That'd be
us.
interesting.
Yeah.
He'd just be putting it on Instagram.
So, guys,
Just
I'm a
arrived
big
in
fan.
Plymouth.
Okay, there we go. Let's move on to the book now, Peter. The way I'll be honest, I don't normally talk about the way I've structured questions because it's a bit unprofessional, but I have kind of structured them in a kind of linear way, and I don't know how much because obviously we want people to go out and get this book as a bloody good read. I don't want you to give too much away or overshare if not. So if any of these questions you'd prefer not to answer, then by all means, go ahead and tell us. But we'll start at the start. We'll go through. When did you first decide that Kevin Parle was going to be the guy that you were going for? Because I know you mentioned there's a few options at the start of who you were going to go for.
Yeah, well, when I left Hunted in February of 2019, of course, I was thinking about what was going to be my next major project. And I was pretty confident that my publisher would give me a contract to write another book. And I thought, okay, I've written plays for Radio 4. I've written 3 books. I've done thousands of broadcasts on crime and policing. But do you know what? I'm best known for catching pretend fugitives on a bloody TV entertainment show, right? So I'm known for catching pretend fugitives. It made sense for me to move away slightly from my previous 2 books, which were about unsolved murders, to actually hunting a real fugitive. I thought that made sense of my skill set, my experience, my network, and what I'm known for. Originally, I was going to hunt a guy called Shane O'Brien, who was wanted for the brutal murder of a wonderful 21-year-old young man called Josh Hanson. And I met Josh's mum, Tracy, spent a lot of time with her, and I'm extremely proud to say she's my friend. Just remarkable woman who suffered the most unimaginable loss and campaigned tirelessly to try and shrink the world for Shane O'Brien, to bring him to justice and stand trial. My publisher agreed that I could go after O'Brien, write a book on it. I started letting a network of friends and associates know that, and I claim no credit for this, absolutely none at all. But no sooner had I signed the contract to go after him than 3 weeks later he got captured. And O'Brien got flown back into the UK. He got captured in Romania. I suspect Tracy's incredible campaign did a lot as I say, to squeeze the planet for Shane O'Brien, although the police have not yet given her any credit for that. And of course, I've stayed in contact with Tracy, because when you reach out and you listen to someone's grief and they invite you into their life, I'm not a hit and run merchant. Okay, so I'm not like a journalist from a newspaper might understandably be. They come to a person, they get their story, they write their 500 words, and the following day they're on to another story.
Yeah.
You know, that's not what I do, and that's not me. And I'm deeply flattered that Tracy and I have stayed friends. And I went to this trial of Shane O'Brien. You know, I couldn't just go into Tracy's life, hear about her grief, earn her trust, and then ditch her because I'm going off to do something else. That is wrong and not me. I went to the trial whenever my work commitments allowed. I'd go there and sit in the public gallery. Obviously, know Tracy's daughter, met other friends and relatives throughout the trial, and was there to see Shane O'Brien convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 26 years, which ain't long enough, in my opinion. But that's another story, and perhaps something for another day. So once O'Brien had been caught, kind of number 2 on my list was Kevin Parle, and I switched my attention to him. He's now been on the run for over 16 years. O'Brien was on the run for 3.5 years before he was captured.
Okay.
And on the 29th of April last year, 2019, I had my press conference and launched my hunt for Parle. At that point, I'd only had the contract for the book. So it was only going to be a book project as I saw it. But I'd met a wonderful man called Mark Sandell. I met him at the BAFTAs one night. The crappiest night out I've ever had the misfortune to endure, right?
Yeah, looks good on the TV.
Right. By 6:30, I think we got there at 6 or something for pre-reception drinks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's the world of TV. So a lot of people that I struggle to describe as modest are there. And we're having these drinks, and I nip out for a fag. And literally, as I'm coming back in, it's 6:30 on a Sunday night. The event has not even kicked off, and a young lady throws up over my shoes.
Oh, God.
Bless her. She'd obviously had a very early start. It kind of set the tone for the night. We got beaten by Love Island. Right? Not that I'm bitter. Congratulations, Love Island. No, great and popular show, perhaps. But yeah, the night just wasn't me, really. But the great, wonderful thing that happened that night was that I met Mark Sandell. He's a podcast producer. Did a brilliant BBC podcast called Beyond Reasonable Doubt. Have a listen if you like a bit of true crime. With a guy called Chris Warburton, a Radio 5 Live presenter, and lovely guy that I've had the pleasure of meeting. And Mark was really interested in doing a podcast with me. And so he came to my press launch for my hunt for Parle, and he's followed me every step of the way throughout the hunt. And after a few months, BBC Sounds and Radio 5 Live co-commissioned a 12-part podcast series on my hunt for Kevin Parle, which is called Manhunt, Finding Kevin Parle. And this podcast has really taken off. It has had over 2.2 million downloads.
Wow.
And counting.
Yeah.
It's proved incredibly popular. We won an award at the New York Festivals Radio Awards, and people have loved it. And what it's helped me do is transform the little-known Kevin Parle into the consciousness of many, many people. And it has now become what was me, my phone, my pen and my notebook, trying to track him down, into a pod that's had global reach, and there is now considerable public interest that he is on the run and has not been caught. I'm hoping that the book just increases this, and this book is written to be another tool in my search for him. Right? Kevin Parle must be found. Kevin Parle will be found. But if people are kind enough to buy and read this book, I'm going to say something that I doubt very many authors would do. Lend it to people.
Mm.
Leave it on the sun lounger if you've gone on holiday. Leave it on the train or the bus if you're on public transport.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want Kevin Parle to become the most well-known fugitive on the entire planet Earth. Because with each passing day, as his notoriety grows and people become more aware about him and the crimes that he's wanted for, it is going to, bit by bit, make life much more difficult for him.
And there's a phrase that you use quite often in the book about shrinking his world, and I really like that. Really like that kind of that idea. Maybe, yeah, pass the Parle, I think it should be, because Peter Crouch has a podcast, doesn't he? And he gets people to share it with Pass the Pod. Well, get this book, Manhunt by Peter Bleksley, and Pass the Parle. Very lovely of you just to encourage people just to give the book away and push it, which proves that it's Parle over profit for you, I guess.
Oh. I mentioned, and I kind of thought long and hard about whether I should put in the book the amount of money that I've earned in connection with my hunt for Kevin Parle. At the time of writing the book, and I decided to put it in there because I like to be open and honest and transparent with people. Yeah. I'm a witness of truth. At the time of writing my manuscript, and when I sent it to my publisher, I had earned, in the course of those 16 months as it was then, it's now about 18 months I've been looking for him, I had earned £8,000. Now, £8,000 is a lot of money. Of course it is. But I have been on the road for weeks and weeks and weeks. Liverpool countless times, and many other places, which you can read about in the book. So, of course, every night was meant a hotel.
Yeah.
Every cup of coffee has had to be bought.
Trains.
Every meal deal.
Right?
Okay. Yeah. Prawn sandwiches. Did I get some stick for that prawn sandwich? Right? Every meal deal has had to be bought. Quite literally, planes, trains, and automobiles. We have used up gallons of fuel. And you know what? Out of that £8,000, I have not put one carrot on my family's dining room table.
Right.
Not a cent.
Yeah.
Nothing. It's all gone on my hunt for Kevin Parle.
Fair play.
I got another payment when I submitted the manuscript, right? That has bought me a new and much more secure laptop and a new phone. These are the tools by which I'm hunting Kevin Parle.
For sure, yeah.
If anybody thinks for a moment, and thank you for that great phrase, that I'm in this for profit, right? That I'm making money out of the misery of others, then come and have a chat with me, because you could not be more wrong.
Yeah, yeah. You talk in the book a lot about waiving fees and stuff for like interviews and stuff like that. So I think it is very much a case of Parle over profit for you. Before we move on to specifics of the book, for anyone that perhaps doesn't know the story or didn't listen to our first episode, I mean, you've gone a long way through this episode if you haven't listened to the first one, but do you want to just explain Kevin Parle's horrific crimes, or the crimes that he's supposedly have committed?
The crimes he's wanted for.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Liam Kelly was a 16-year-old boy, and I haven't found anybody that would describe him as a model student. He got up to some shenanigans, but so did I when I was 16.
Yeah.
Liam Kelly was called onto a straightener in June 2004 in Grafton Street in Liverpool. A straightener, right, where people in the world of criminality try to get things straight amongst themselves. They always end badly, in my experience. He was blasted to death with a shotgun. 16-year-old boy, denied the right to grow, to mature, to enter manhood, to find a life partner, to have a family, to leave his shenanigans behind and provide for them. Denied all of that because he was gunned down. 3 people have been convicted in regard to Liam's murder, Kevin Parle, a court was told, pulled the trigger and remains wanted for this crime. He is unconvicted, he's not stood trial, but he's very much wanted for it. Just over a year later, in August 2005, a 22-year-old mother of 3 young children, who has been described to me as being as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside, Lucy Hargreaves, was blasted to death with a shotgun as she lay on her sofa in her home. That house was then set on fire. Lucy's partner escaped with their youngest child from an upstairs window. 2 men have stood trial for Lucy's murder. The court was told that if Kevin Parle had been, captured, he would have stood trial. However, these 2 men did not even have to present a defence to the charges because the judge slung the case out at what we call half-time. Right. Okay? The prosecution case then was not strong enough. And those 2 men skipped out of the court, 3 men, but it did not inspire them to live a law-abiding life. In fact, those 2 men who were acquitted of Lucy's murder are both now serving life sentences with a minimum term of 22 years for a campaign of terror, basically, with guns and grenades. Some 16 shootings, 4 explosions, during which innocent people were hurt, including a paramedic and others. They were subsequently sprung from a prison van while they were on trial, fled the country, were both later arrested separately, brought back and tried, and they're now serving 22 years. I wrote to one of them, and the letter that he wrote to me back features in the book.
Wow.
He doesn't speak to me in particularly friendly terms, shall we say. I doubt I'm his favourite Zenist personality.
You know the murder of Liam.
Yeah.
You mentioned there was it 3 people that were put on trial?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This seems like a bit of a silly question, so just tell me if it is. But am I right in saying they were involved, but they all said that Kevin Parle pulled the trigger?
Forgive me, let me clarify. It's not a silly question, and
Yeah.
thanks for asking it, Jack. Okay. Anthony Campbell
Yeah.
was convicted of murder. He pleaded guilty to murder,
Right.
insomuch as that he admitted his involvement in calling Liam on, knowing fully well that it wasn't going to end well.
Right.
So Anthony Campbell is serving life with a minimum of 26 years. A guy called Peter Sinclair got 8 years for assisting Kevin Parle, providing another getaway car, disposing of clothing and phones, and helping Parle in that regard, burning some clothing that might have had incriminating evidence. So Peter Sinclair was convicted of that, got 8 years for that. And a young lady, a very naive lady who thought she was Kevin Parle's sole girlfriend at the time, was convicted of providing a false alibi statement, and she got a short sentence.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking, if these 3 people were connected, but they all kind of claimed, "No, it's not me, it's not me, it's not me." What evidence or are we certain that this is a real person that exists? Do you know what I mean? I don't want that to sound like a stupid question, but I imagine if me and Stevie and someone, say us 3, got put in front of the court, we could all go, "No, it's this other guy." Do you know what I mean? What is the evidence that he was there, that he was a part of this, and that he is a real person?
Yeah, obviously I didn't sit through the trial.
Yeah.
Of Anthony Campbell, Peter Sinclair, and that young lady, but the court was told that Parle pulled the trigger. However, Parle, as I've repeatedly said, is unconvicted of this crime, but is very much wanted for it. He's on the National Crime Agency's Most Wanted list. My job, or the task that I set myself, is not to gather further evidence in relation to the crimes. I'm not investigating the crimes per se. My parameters are narrow. My goal is a clear and distinct one, and that is find Kevin Parle. And that is what I have challenged myself to do, and that is what I am going to do.
Okay, so you learn of the crimes, you decide you're going to go for Kevin Parle. What's the first things you put into place? I know you held a press conference, as you said. You held that in April of last year.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be in Liverpool, but because of certain external factors, such as journalists not willing to go all that way, it ended up being in London. I guess my double question there is, how was it as successful as you thought because it was in London? And the second thing was, what are the main components of a press conference? Is it just to get the word out there?
I'd never held a press conference, right? I'm a veteran of thousands of media interviews. You know, there's not many days go by, or certainly not weeks go by, when I'm not on some news outlet talking about crime and policing in some way, shape or form. And yet, you know what? My agent booked the venue. It was in Fleet Street. So it's kind of like a room, you know, with some desks and chairs. And we put up my posters of Kevin Parle and all that stuff. And I was actually really nervous.
Was you?
Really uncharacteristically nervous. I didn't know if people were going to turn up. I didn't know what I was going to be asked. So I was venturing into the unknown. It went well. Danny Shaw, the BBC Home Affairs correspondent, turned up, front row, sitting right in front of me. I've met Danny on previous occasions. Great, a big hitter. Yeah. One of the national dailies turned up. Great, another big hitter. The Press Association turned up. Now, they're an agency that many news outlets take their news from.
Okay.
And they're there with a camera and a mic. And, of course, my great mate, Mark Sandell, who was hoping to pitch for a podcast series at the time, is there with his mic. And there were others there. And it went well. I thought it went really well. It lasted 30, 40 minutes. I spoke for 20 minutes or so, and then there was questions. And Danny Shaw from the BBC asked a couple of typical, brilliant BBC questions, right? Just what you would want and expect from a national broadcaster. First one is, has anybody ever done this before? In other words, has a private citizen like myself gone on the hunt for a wanted murderer? And the answer to that was, well, to my knowledge, no. So I think it is pretty unique what I'm doing. And then the second question was, which was every inch BBC, and I loved it. He said, who's paying for it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Fair dues. They're a national broadcaster.
Yeah.
You've got to be held to account. It's a perfectly valid, brilliant question. I said, me.
Yeah.
You know, and at that point, I'd had $2,000 from my publisher, right? Which had virtually all gone.
Well, the press conference cost you 1,800 quid, didn't it? For the press conference alone.
Plus some other bits, yeah. But by that stage, yeah. So, you know, it was just swallowing up money.
Wow.
But you know, it's fine, as you say. I love this, you know, Parle not profit line, which I'm unashamedly going to rip from you.
Yeah.
and broadcast far and wide. So thank you.
Just going off the first question he asked, I was intrigued earlier. You mentioned that you don't have, when Jack asked if you can spot things in London, you said you don't have a warrant card anymore. What would happen when you do find him? Do you just have to do a citizen's arrest? Do you get the police to get him?
I imagine you won't physically find him, will you? You'll find him or will you? Like, I can't imagine it's going to be as straightforward as you, like, hey, got ya. Do you know what I mean? I think it's going to be
Hopefully
more...
he doesn't do that.
I'm going to deal with Stevie's question. Kevin Parle is 6'6".
Jesus Christ.
Broadly built, right? Still very fit, as I'm told, right? And 20 years younger than me, right?
Give it a miss, Peter.
If it comes to a street fight, there's only going to be one winner, and it won't be me, right? So I am not going to make some ham-fisted amateur attempt to slap the handcuffs on.
Okay.
That will be for law enforcement to do.
So your aim is to find his location and then hand it over?
In essence, yes.
Is that going to kill you a bit, handing it over? Because you mentioned that police forces aren't super They don't super back you, do they? These police forces. You're very much on your own in your efforts here.
Yeah, I've got a relationship with the Merseyside police, which they describe as informal,
Right.
whatever the friggin' heck that might mean, right? Okay, it just sounds to me like an each-way bet. So they call it informal, and
You just fist bumping your mate.
They can justify their actions or inactions or whatever. So it's a very interesting relationship that I've got with the Detective Chief Inspector from Merseyside Police. It's courteous, it's respectful. Forgive me for saying you can read a lot more about it in the book, but it is interesting. Now, I'm going to give credit where it's due. On one occasion, Merseyside Police proactively launched an operation and carried it out the following day. So in that regard, they showed a willingness to respond, shall we say. However, I think it's fair to question, as I do, whether law enforcement really has the appetite for capturing Kevin Parle. When I had my first face-to-face meeting with the DCI, Detective Chief Inspector, and his Detective Inspector, it was me and Mark, and it was in their new swanky operational headquarters up in Liverpool. Beautiful building, fabulous, and all the 21st century security you can imagine, And we've gone through there and we're sat in an office. And I've been really open with Merseyside Police. At this point, they had a synopsis of my book, which authors don't send synopsises of their books to bloody police forces, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I did. I told them exactly what I was aiming to do, what my intentions were. And at that meeting, where the DI's there and the DCI's there, I said, it is not my intention to embarrass anybody. The DI leant forward and said, trust me, we will not be embarrassed. Now, I don't know what the subtext to that is, right? And I've spent quite a bit of time trying to figure it out. Is it they won't be embarrassed because, well, I don't know. I'll let readers have a read.
Yeah, speculate it, you will,
and make their own minds up about it. Let's remember, generally speaking, our police forces are underfunded, under-resourced, and overworked. Lockdown didn't mean slow down either for me or them. There were a number of murders in Merseyside during lockdown. In fact, a pal of mine who works in the media rang me and said he's a part of a TV show which was going to be lockdown's 100 murders, apparently.
Fucking hell.
People didn't stop murdering each other.
Jesus.
So they've got a lot on their plate.
Yeah.
But I do question whether the resources they deploy to investigating him and the appetite. And let me just mention something here, if I may, right? If you were Merseyside Police and you looked at Liam's murder, you might say, well, actually, we did a kind of okay job on that. Anthony Campbell convicted of murder, Peter Sinclair 8 years, the other woman, convicted and sentenced. Although, of course, my argument is, well, you nicked Kevin Parle in the early stages of that inquiry, but you granted him bail and he was never seen again.
That tells you everything you need to know, isn't it?
So it wasn't quite it wasn't a really thorough and successful investigation, was it? But they might just try and say, look, we kind of did all right on that.
Yeah.
And then they look at Lucy's murder, where two people stood trial but were acquitted at half time during that trial. They didn't have to give any defence at all because the prosecution wasn't strong enough. Do the police want to revisit that? When Kevin Parle is captured, if there's no new, fresh and compelling evidence with regards to Lucy's murder, will they even charge him with it?
Yeah.
Or will they solely charge him with Liam's murder?
Yeah.
So is it easier for them to have Kevin Parle in the too difficult trade, gathering dust and doing nothing about it?
Yeah. this isn't a loaded question. I don't want you to slag off anyone that you're not comfortable. But you know how police officers get, like, I don't know what the reward system is. I don't know how they get what's it called when you get promoted? Yeah, I don't know what a footballer's job is to score a goal, right? What is the goal of a police officer? Because they've charged them certain people that were involved in Liam's murder. Have they kind of already got the win there for them? They have no motive to go and get Kevin. They've already ticked it. It's filed.
Kevin Parle, a court was told he pulled the trigger, and he's still very much wanted for it. So it's far from a complete, satisfying, well conducted investigation.
Yeah, it's still like in our eyes, it's far from over. But in their eyes, do they not have? Because you hear this, and it's probably quite an ignorant thing to say, but you hear these stories of police officers going for kids that are smoking weed in the street because if they get an arrest, it's a tick on their thing. Does that happen, or is that more just kind of like movie speak?
Unfortunately, there is a bit of target-driven policing.
Yeah,
that filters from the top down, and they do, of course, prioritise things.
Yeah.
And now I'm being told that, like, the National Crime Agency and certain police forces are very much into cybercrime, people trafficking, human slavery. They're far higher priorities than they were.
Right.
And they might supersede other things.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think, drug dealing and stuff doesn't feature anywhere near as prominently towards the top of police priorities as it used to.
Right.
Going off of what Jack just said, if you were to find Parle and he only went to prison for the first murder, would that count as a win? Because you've still got this other case that has technically no...
The Lucy Hargreaves
Yeah,
case,
you'll still have Lucy.
I'll refer you to what I said earlier. The task I've set myself is purely to find Kevin Parle. I'm not investigating the murders. I'm not gathering the evidence. He's Britain's most wanted, suspected murderer, and I'm going to find him.
Okay.
That's my goal. But on that very note, because there's a £20,000 reward up for grabs from the police, right, for Kevin Parle's capture. And I discussed this when I was with the DCI and the DI. I said, does that 20 grand reward still stand? Because that's quite an incentive, isn't it? And they said, oh, yeah, it still stands, but it is subject to, to arrest and conviction. Now, I said, conviction for both murders, building on what you've just said. And I've sort of got a bit of a blank look, stare back kind of thing. I said, because I think that is manifestly unfair. If somebody comes to me, gives me the golden nugget that I require, in other words, he is at 123 Acacia Avenue now, and he'll still be there at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, right? They give me that evidence. Law enforcement acts upon that information, sorry, not evidence. They act upon that information. Kevin Parle is captured, brought over to the UK. Surely the informant should get that 20 grand for providing that information alone. Tying it to him then being convicted is unfair, because the informant that's come to me has absolutely no control whatsoever about what might happen in a court of law. So I said, all right. I said, so picture that scene. What if he gets convicted only of Liam's murder and not Lucy's? Are you going to pay that 20 grand then to my potential informant? And he said, well, we will have to take a view. Yeah, you're frigging right, you will. And I'm going to be all over you like a rash if those circumstances were to prevail.
Yeah.
I said to him, what if an informant comes to me and says, get your shovel, right, and go to these woods, go 100 yards that way, 30 yards that way, dig 3 foot down and you'll find him. I said, does the 20 grand count then? We would have to take a pragmatic view.
Oh, God.
Okay, all right, fine. I understand they've got to be careful in what they say and all that stuff. And as I say, I've got a kind of decent relationship, which I don't want to overly sour, although it might be too late for that, as you will discover when you read the book. But so what? You know, I've as long as they do something, when I pick up the phone and said, he's here now,
Yeah.
do something, then that's fine.
Mm.
You know, we don't have to be mates and
No.
all that stuff.
You travel to Liverpool early on in your hunt, early on in the book, and you're handing out flyers with Mark and two members of the public, two Liverpudlian people, two separate people, I believe. One tips you, gives you a tip off and says that maybe maybe Kevin's residing in Holland, and another one says Spain, which seems to come up a lot. Spain. How much, as a one-man band, so to speak, how much does Kevin potentially being abroad limit your search?
Well, the Holland thing literally came from somebody who courageously rang me up the following morning after the press conference. So from the press conference, we travelled up to Liverpool not long afterwards and spent a few nights up there. And literally the following morning, the phone rang, and I'm fumbling around with my burner phone trying to figure out how it operates. And he said, I think I've seen him in Holland. That information, because he said it's right under the gaze of a fixed permanent CCTV camera, which will definitely have spotted him if it were him. So that information, I kind of mulled it over, not for very long. I said, well, that's got to go straight to the police. You know, I'm a writer with a notebook. Whoever runs that CCTV system, because I'm sure in Holland they've got data protection laws like we have over here, they're not going to go, oh, yeah, sure, Mr. Peter, writer, bloke off the radio, whatever, come and have a look at our CCTV.
Mm.
You know, you're going to need authorities to do that, legal authorities to do that. So that information went straight over to the old Bill, and they've not followed up on it. I mean, they've not told me, what happened with that information, but I think it's safe to say that was not Kevin Parle.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was probably a very well-intentioned member of the public who was perhaps thought they saw him.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Mm.
Don't ever think if you think you've seen him, you shouldn't contact me. If you think you've seen him, contact me.
Yeah.
Contact me. You know, it'll be my job to try and bottom that out, corroborate it or not.
How does that get... They're doing it with the best intentions, as you said,
Yeah.
the members of public. But because, like, I imagine that I've gone down the street and seen someone that looks like him. I know you mentioned he's massive, but just looking at his face, he doesn't look particularly, like, unusual. So I imagine you get calls, or you would get calls from a lot of people, or people respond to the flyers and say they've seen him. How is it hard to pick out the diamond amongst the rough?
It has been a challenge for me.
Yeah, I bet.
But don't let that stop people from
Right.
contacting me.
Yeah.
Please, please do. You know, I've had many sightings reported to me. And of course, I log them. I see if I can cross-check them with anything else that I've been told or that I've discovered along the way. And it's really important. For example, we'll talk about Spain. Mark and I went to Spain. It features heavily in the book. And we also made 2 episodes of our podcast about that trip to Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, one of the most kind of interesting moments that we had when we were out there was I'd been told that Parle used a bar called the Chill Out Bar. And he'd been seen in the Chill Out Bar in a Spanish town called Albier, which is a few kilometres outside of Benidorm. So Mark and I, flight was delayed. I really don't like flying. Not because I'm scared of flying, but I don't like all the hassle of airports and security and taking your shoes off and all that kind of stuff. I will comply, okay? If my lips are moving slightly, it's just because I'm muttering under my breath because I'm not overly happy about all the procedures, but they're very necessary and I comply without complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I just don't like airports and flying. Anyway, so our flight is delayed. We have to rejig our itinerary. So we go to the hotel, dump our stuff, walk off looking for this bar called Chill Out that I'd struggled to find a website for and to get very much information for it at all. But we eventually, after going around the houses for a bit, start walking towards this bar and I can make out a multicoloured sign above it saying Chill Out. And I'm thinking, great, this is a bar where I've been told Parle has recently been seen. And as I get closer and closer and closer to the bar, I see that barrier tape, the type which you get at crime scenes, is tied all across the front of this frigging bar, and the doors are chained together with a huge chain and padlock. I've come all the way to frigging Spain to find a bar that's shut and has been for months.
Fuck.
I am not happy.
Mm.
Not happy in the slightest. Anyway, I get back in touch with one of my numerous courageous sources from Liverpool, elsewhere in the UK, Spain, further afield, round the globe, and let me just say it here, I thank you all. But of course, I haven't found him yet, so please keep the information coming.
Mm.
I get back to the source who's kind of horrified by what they've heard, and they speak to someone else, and the source gets back to me and says, right, where somebody says he has definitely been seen is in a cannabis club, right? And in Spain and other places, they have these cannabis clubs or cannabis associations, as they're called, right? And you can pay anything from like 20 euros to 100 euros or more to become a member. You've got to show your photographic ID, you've got to be resident, and then you can go to these clubs, have a drink, and smoke your weed. Your weed being highly relevant. You can't buy drugs in there. They're not allowed to deal drugs. That's strictly off limits. But if you want to take your personal into one of these clubs or associations and get stoned with other like-minded potheads, you can, right? So, okay, we shift our focus a little bit, and the following morning, Mark and I, and we're told where it is, right? We said it's between a bar called Cocktail and a gym, right? Again, in Albir, Albir. So Mark and I, we narrow down this bar called Cocktail. It's got a very distinct sign. Find the gym eventually, with a bit of kind of flamenco music pumping out and some ladies doing a Zumba class and all that kind of stuff. Trust me, I wasn't tempted to join in. Right? And we see this white-fronted building, and to me it looked like a doctor's surgery or a dental surgery. You know, it was kind of like that sort of sterile white frontage with glass that kind of looks like you can't see in, but they might be able to see out.
Yeah.
It didn't look, to me, it did not look like the place that I would expect a cannabis association or club to look like, right? So there's me and Mark. Mark's got his microphone at the ready, always hoovering up audio for the podcast. Don't know if you know anything about podcasting.
Not a thing.
A bit later on, I can explain it to you. Right? And there's a bit of paper, A4, stuck on the door, and I'm looking at it. It's closed for refurb or whatever. Fortunately, it was written in Spanish, but then conveniently translated for me. So there we are, and we're having a peek around. I'm just doing my usual nosy, photographing the bit of paper because it's got a telephone number on it. You know, once an investigator, always an investigator, right? And no sooner we're doing this, and two blokes appear out the door, right? Two Mediterranean-looking young men in their 30s, and they said, you know, how can we help you? In very good English. And I said, oh, I'm looking for a bloke called Kevin. Right? And one of them went, oh, tall Kevin. I said, yeah, tall Kevin. And they said, what do you want to talk to him about? You'll see me closing my eyes and hanging my head in shame now, because in 40 years of investigating, 21 years in the old bill and the last 20 years writing and broadcasting, but doing a lot of investigating, I made the biggest frigging ricket of my life, for which I am still beating myself up. I said, yeah, so what do you want to talk to him for? I've got my rucksack. I've always got my rucksack. I put my hand in it and I pulled out one of my flyers.
Oh.
Right? With his picture on, right? The pictures are all in the book. And those pictures on the flyer are computer-generated images done by John Moores University in Liverpool to age him using computer graphics to give an image of what he might look like now. And so I showed them the flyer. But of course, they are unmistakably taken from a police mugshot. And they immediately went, "Oh, no, that's not our Kevin. Our Kevin we're talking about is 75 years old." Right. But of course, you know what I should have done? And they said, "What do you want to speak to him for?" I've got this rucksack. It's always bulging, full and heavy. I should have just gone, "I've got 100,000 euros for him."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Now, if I'd done that, who knows where my investigation may have gone?
Wow.
Who knows what the future would have been?
Is there not a take two you can do with somebody else in a few months?
Well, I'm sure Kevin will have a read of this.
Yeah.
I'm sure he will not be able to help himself.
How aware of you do you think he is?
I'm utterly convinced. I mean, the pod has had a global reach. It's top 10 in countries as far afield as Austria, Spain, the Philippines.
Wow.
And all manner of places. I've got a lot of female admirers from the Philippines keep trying to friend me on Facebook. Right. It's like a granny's gallery, right? Like, bless them. You know, it's very flattering and very nice and all that sort of stuff. But no, I'm married. I'm married, kids and all that.
During your hunt, you team up with a bunch of what you refer to as ethical hackers.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
Right. These people essentially and invariably, with the permission of whoever it is they're going to target companies, banks, insurance companies, you name it, and try and hack them to expose weaknesses in their systems. And then if they do expose a weakness in the system, they can then fix it and prevent it.
Right.
So they're not, people sitting in their bedrooms trying to clear your bank account out.
Yeah.
They are ethical hackers, and hacking's what they do. And in fact, part of their recruitment campaign is they quite brilliantly reach out to teenagers, gifted teenagers who are spending too much time in their rooms and are actually getting up to naughty stuff, or being recruited into criminality. Any parents, if you're listening, do not leave your kid for hours in their rooms without saying, "Excuse me, what are you doing? Show me, please. I want to see." Because there are rotten, unscrupulous criminals out there that will groom your kids and trick them or tease them or force them into criminality, which might blight their lives forever. Now, through my contacts with these ethical hackers, there is a guy who runs a recruitment agency, and the kind of kids he is reaching out to are those 16-year-olds in their rooms, kind of like with their lives in the balance. Are they going to go down a route of criminality, or can he engage them, employ them? They earn astonishing salaries, and they become ethical hackers as opposed to finding themselves in deep trouble.
Yeah, one of the ethical hackers is quoted in the book as saying, "If Parle's alive, he's online." How true do you believe that to be? Can anybody be found and tracked online?
Yeah, and I give that line all due credit.
Yeah,
but I'm not overly convinced. And what I say is, I'm sure he's got access to computers, but I don't suppose he's leaving. I would be very surprised if he's sitting each and every night on a laptop of his.
Yeah, on Facebook
with a traceable IP address.
Just posting, just left Spain.
Yeah,
no, but even in a false identity, I think he may use other people's devices to say, well, can I have a look at this? Can I have a look at that?
Right.
So that if he's alive, he's online thing. We'll see. We'll see when he's captured, because the police will see if will search for devices and all that stuff when they find him.
Talking of online, you got a load of stick from members of the public, didn't you? When you went public with your search, what kind of stuff were you getting sent?
From some, just the usual kind of trolling and abuse. I mentioned last time pictures of my house together with an accurate description of the bedroom that I sleep in. They're just wasting their time.
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of bloke that's going to be put off, bullied, frightened. Or
Why are they?
cowed
Why
or
are they
anything.
doing it? I don't understand. Are they Parle supporters?
Well, they might be people that detest me.
Right.
They might be Parle supporters. They might have some interest in Kevin Parle. But what I do remain pretty convinced of is that they've got one hand on the keyboard and the other hand on their tiny penises.
He's caught me.
You're out. You're out. What's Interpol and why is Kevin Parle not on it?
Right. Okay. Interpol and Europol. Right. Interpol, global organisation to which hundreds upon hundreds of police forces from around the world subscribe. And it's essentially an organisation that assists police forces in communicating with one another.
Oh, okay.
And it's a big player. It's a very big, serious player. Europol is obviously its European kind of sister organisation. And they have most wanted lists. And Interpol often issue what's called a red notice against somebody who is wanted. And I would fully expect Kevin Parle to be on Interpol's most wanted list, Europol's most wanted list, and be subject to an Interpol red notice. He is not. And I have asked Merseyside Police, why not? And they have not got back to me.
That's very strange.
The only wanted list he features on is the National Crime Agency's most wanted list.
Yeah, they're a separate entity to the police force, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah.
They are. And that kind of, yet again, it cuts across this question. Is there an appetite to find him? Am I the only bloke who really kind of gives a toss here?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not now, courtesy of the pod being on here, the book. There are thousands upon thousands of people that want Kevin Parle captured. During lockdown, I did some ham-fisted attempts at humour during lockdown, just to try and raise the mood. And at one point I said, I've spoken to Father Christmas. He's socially distancing. Everything's fine. But he's asked me to ask you what your wish lists are. So please tell me what you want and I'll pass it on to Father Christmas. And I kid you not, people in all seriousness were going, all I want for Christmas is to see Kevin Parle caught. And they were utterly serious about that.
Yeah.
It's a public interest thing now that he is on the run and not in handcuffs.
Do you think like someone like the whole Interpol side of it are just looking at it like he's not a big enough hitter, or because it happened so long ago, it's not enough interest to them? Or
Interpol and Europol will be reliant upon the input from the UK.
so it comes down to the UK not pushing it forward enough.
Where should people contact you if they've got any information about Kevin Parle, Britain's most wanted murderer? What do they do?
Right. The last page of the book is entitled Contact the Author. Okay. And quite frankly, I could barely be more contactable. There is a phone number, of course. 07908 617 694. Okay, that's the phone that I set up to receive information about Parliament. There's an email address, Peter Bleksley at msn.com. I'm on Twitter, Peter Bleksley. I'm on Facebook, Peter Bleksley. I'm on LinkedIn, Peter Bleksley. Have I missed any?
Instagram?
I've got Instagram. I'm on Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm not on Snapchat, and this I'm purely saying, right, to irritate my kids, because I was saying, shall I get a Snapchat account? And then I can say, hit me up on Snap. If you ever say that to anyone, we will be so embarrassed and irritated. Never say it. Just did, boys. Check it out on Jack Bates Happy. Hit me up on Snap. Just again to irritate you. Right. Sorry, everybody, I'm not on Snapchat. Right. Yeah. Instagram, Peter Bleksley. Yeah, I'm across all of those. I've got a website, peterbleksley.com. You can email me via that. I could barely be more contactable.
That number again.
However.
Go on, sorry.
All right, yeah, I'll do the number again if I may. 07908 617 694. Now, and this is important, please. if you have information about Kevin Parle that you don't want to pass to me, you can ring Crime Stoppers. You can ring Merseyside Police. So you're welcome to go down those routes, or the National Crime Agency. You can do all of that.
There's other avenues.
Okay?
Yeah.
There are. So and that's fine. But I promise you, unless you double cross me, I will always, 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 to the ends of the earth, protect your identity. Non-negotiable.
There we
End
go.
of.
Sounds like a good trade for anyone out there that has information. Peter, 2 final quick questions. The first one is, any final words for Kevin?
Can I just mention something
Do it.
very quickly?
Do it.
Right? Because we talked about the reward.
Yeah.
Right? I do not have a monopoly on good ideas. And I've been very fortunate in that people have contacted me with suggestions and ideas, volunteering to do things to help and all that kind of stuff. And it's absolutely wonderful. The other day, a guy got in touch with me and he said, seeing as the police reward is subject to arrest and conviction, why don't you GoFundMe a reward pot which is only subject to arrest? Now, there's some legalities about that. And I'm not going down that route at all yet, okay? Because I've got so much to do. But it's interesting, right? It's a great idea that might come to fruition one day.
Yeah.
If I can get the legals sorted out, if I GoFundMe and ask people to donate £1, who knows what the size of the pot might become.
Yeah.
And if I say this is purely for his arrest, crack on. Who knows? Something up my sleeve maybe. But they're the kind of great ideas that I love hearing.
Yeah.
So please get in touch, whether it's a thought, a theory, or it's actual information. And I don't care how old it is either, because past behaviour is often a very good indicator as to what future behaviour may be. Your question, have I got a message for Kevin Parle? I'm coming for you.
He's coming for you, mate. He's coming for you. I don't think he's got to the end of this podcast. I don't know if he's out there listening to podcasts. Don't know where he is. Don't know what he's doing. But I back you very much like you backed them winning dogs that day, Peter. So good luck to you there. Thank you once again for coming on and giving us.
We aren't ending this without finding out
Wait.
why he slept with his enemy.
Oh.
No.
I said I was bringing that back up.
For all that time.
No chance. Right?
I said we were bringing it up again.
The bottle of wine is very much appreciated, right? But a deal's a deal, right? Half-price cocktails when I come back.
You come back.
Visit number 3.
And hopefully visit number 3, you can talk about how you caught Kevin Parle. Imagine that.
And I might have a shagging story.
That's what we all want.
And maybe we'll be able to hit you up on Snap when you're back. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Peter. Thank you very much. Guys, go follow him on Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. You've got the number. You know what to do. A question that we finish on for all of our guests during season 4 is, Peter Bleksley, what is the meaning of life?
The fundamental rule, essentially, is the meaning of life. And the fundamental rule says that we don't kill one another. Okay? It's the rule that holds our society together. And those who breach it, of course, have huge resources applied to the investigation and the finding of them and then being put in front of a court and all of that. So, for me, life is dictated by, our very existence is dictated by, and therefore, for me, the meaning of life is the fundamental rule that we do not kill one another.
There we go. This has been Jack Mate's Happy Hour. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Peter. Cheers.
You're welcome.
Brilliant. Brilliant episode.
You were wonderful,
Yeah.
bud. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.